Hello, my name is Dionysios Choukhlakis. I will be moderating the session. I'm a commercial associate at Aurora Energy Research. I'm based in Berlin. Aurora is basically a price energy analytics company. And today we will be speaking about sustainability and the Green Deal, heading for the Green Deal. First of all, I would like to thank the conference for hosting us today and giving us this opportunity to discuss all these very interesting topics. And I will be presenting, first of all, our speakers. Each speaker will have 10 minutes for the presentation, and then at the end we will have 30 minutes for the roundtable discussion. Starting with Ms. Georgios Tsifoutidis, who is the head of Geothermal Energy Department in the Ministry of Environment and Energy in Greece. Ms. Sofia Yalama, who is ESG and Sustainability Consultant based in Cairo, Egypt. Mr. Mikhail Tomadakis, who is Strategy and Development Division Director in DESFA. Mr. Yannis Hadjiannis, who is an Assistant Professor at the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the Hellenic Mediterranean University. Ms. Maria Apostolaki, who is representing the region of Crete, and Ms. Michael Hadjipanos, who is representing IPTO. Furthermore, we have Ms. Sharon Jackson, who is the Director for the European Sustainability Academy and will be joining us as a special guest for the roundtable discussion. So maybe let's start with Mr. Tomadakis.
Good afternoon from my side. I'm Michael Tomadakis, head of the Strategy and Development Division of DESFA. I'm going to speak to you about the role of the infrastructure in the development of the hydrogen value chain, and also on what DESFA does to expand the gas market in Greece with a view to also meet the future needs of sustainable gases. Now, this is the network of DESFA at a glance. We already import gas from 3 separate pipeline points from Bulgaria, Russian gas from Turkey, gas from Azerbaijan, but also from TAP in Nea Messimvria, near Thessaloniki, as you can see here, and where our system connects to TAP. And we have also another import point, which is the LNG terminal in Revithoussa. In Kula, the border with Bulgaria and Revithoussa are the 2 initial import points of gas to Greece. Turkey-Greece interconnector has been established in 2007, whereas Nea Messimvria and TAP operate since 2020, when TAP was put in operation, so almost 2 years now. However, instead of, we are currently implementing a very rigorous project for the development of our network, with the view that this network becomes an energy gateway to Southeast Europe. You see here imports in the last few years, with blue the pipeline gas and with green the LNG. You see the increasing role of LNG. 2022 was the first year that LNG imports are bypassing pipeline imports, who have a huge interest for LNG imports, not only for Greece but also for the region. And we are currently implementing a rather ambitious 10-year development plan comprising of projects that amount to some 830 million euros. The first one being the high-pressure pipeline to West Macedonia. This is the first high-pressure pipeline in Greece that is ready to accommodate 100% hydrogen flows. We are also implementing the high-pressure pipeline to Western Greece, which is number 2 here. You see is the expansion from Megalopoli to Patras. Next month, we are going to have the operation of the truck loading facility for LNG, small-scale LNG trucks that operates in Revithousa, and we are in the phase of development for the construction of a jetty which is going to accommodate small-scale LNG vessels that may take LNG also to the islands and the parts of Greece that are not currently gasified. We have, of course, next week we are going to have the market test for the construction, the market test for the construction of the interconnector between Greece and North Macedonia. And we have in our 10-year development plan the supply of natural gas to the region around Ioannina, either through pipelines, through a pipeline, the extension of our network, or with small-scale LNG facilities. And we participate in the FSRU Alexandroupolis, as you may know, which is about to start operations at the end of 2023. But we have also the very active interest for gas, for imports of gas by other entrepreneurs, and I'm speaking about the FSRUs of the Origa in the projected plan of Motor Oil. We have the interest for a new FSRU in Volos, and of course the IGB pipeline, which is almost ready to transport gas from Greece to Bulgaria, and of course, as I said, the TAP pipeline. Among the projects of interest for DESFA is also the underground gas storage in South Kavala. Of course, this is a rather, let's say, ambitious but not very lucky project. We'll see what will happen. If it ever happens, it will be the first gas storage facility in Greece. Greece is among the few countries in Europe that they have no gas storage at all. And as you may have heard, DESFA is operating one of the biggest LNG import terminals in the world in Kuwait, the so-called Kipik LNG terminal, which is 8 times bigger than Revithousa. Now, as I mentioned, we are operating from next month onwards for the first time small-scale LNG facilities in Greece, in the island of Revithousa, and we have done an analysis to identify which are the areas that may be the small-scale LNG implementation allow to bring gas to those areas. Of course, the main one being around Revithousa and the Piraeus terminal for bunkering purposes, so that LNG is used as fuel for the vessels. The second area is around Ioannina, so western Greece, with very good prospects, not only for Greece but also for the countries around Greece. Western Balkans have no gas at all, as you may know. And of course, one of the regions that are of specific focus, and that's why I'm referring to it, is Crete. We have analyzed, not very much in depth at this stage, but we intend to go further there. Primarily for the bunkering sector, for which we have already an analysis, and off-grid solutions to bring LNG to off-grid consumers, which is, let's say, I would say, an interim step toward bringing renewable gases such as biomethane and why not hydrogen in the near future to the island, or exploiting production of hydrogen in the island. And biomethane, as we know, there is room for implementation of biomethane and biogases in Crete. As I said, we are deep diving into that. We will investigate the issue further and combine a potential import of gas to Crete for those purposes you're seeing here, bunkering, and as I said, off-grid solutions, with a view to implement also and develop infrastructure that might be used by renewable gases. But this is something we are going to pursue in the following months. Now, in parallel to what we do, we have a very strong view on how hydrogen is going to be introduced in our system. First of all, in phase 1, as we call it here, we perform a study which is going to be finalized soon, how much hydrogen can be blended into natural gas in our existing system. Whereas as a phase 2, we have already developed and proposed also to the Repower EU projects, the first backbone, the one you see with green color here, a parallel pipeline, which is going to be a hydrogen-ready pipeline to be developed and formulate the backbone of hydrogen in Greece and be part of Southeast European hydrogen backbone. This is a rigorous plan. However, this can be accommodated and supported by its use also in the interim initial stages, if needed, partially for the transportation of natural gas to the north, waiting for the time where hydrogen is going to be ready in abundance for the region, for Greece and the region, and of course this will greatly accommodate the development of a hydrogen market in Greece. We are in close cooperation with our neighbors on that. North Macedonia, the pipeline to North Macedonia is going to be hydrogen ready. As I said, also the pipeline to Western Macedonia is going to be hydrogen ready. We are already discussing with Bulgartransgas, the TSO of Bulgaria, to connect their hydrogen system to our hydrogen system, so to this pipeline. And of course, we are in discussions with TAP and SNAM for potential future transportation of production of produced hydrogen in Greece to their systems. And I'm closing by mentioning that last month, in June, the European Hydrogen Backbone members signed a commitment to establish the European hydrogen supply corridors by 2030. And of course, what you see is Corridor E. So our system, together with the ones of the EU member states to the north, will formulate what has already been described as a Corridor E, East and Southeast Europe. Of course, it will take time, but everything starts with a small step. The aim is, as I mentioned, to develop the hydrogen-ready pipelines that are going to be connected to each other and formulate the European hydrogen backbone. Of course, this does not only need time, it needs also market and money. But for this, we will talk in another session. So thank you very much, and I'm ready to questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to also ask Mr. Georgios Tsifutidis to present. Is he joining? Great. We cannot hear you.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Melvin, as I'm trying to activate the share screen, I would like to say that in this presentation, I shall be presenting some basic ideas behind the geothermal energy in Greece and the possibility of starting a production. Something went wrong with my computer, and I deeply apologize for that. It's most embarrassing. So I'm sorry. Can we move on to the next presenter? I apologize for this mishandling until I find the file, the correct file.
Yes.
My deepest apologies.
No problem. Then I would like to ask Ms. Sofia Yalama to take the stage.
Yes, sure.
Hello.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. In case there is any issue with the presentation and it doesn't move, please let me know because of any connection issues. So, hello everyone. On behalf of the Global Sustain team, I would like to thank you for the invitation. It's an immense pleasure and honor to be with you today. My name is Sofia Galama, and I'm an ESG and sustainability consultant at Global Sustain. I'm based in Cairo, and today I'm going to present you the Global Sustain rating application and how we help entities raise ESG awareness, measure, manage, and evaluate their ESG performance. Well, first of all, it is necessary to mention why ESG rating is gaining importance at international, European, and national levels. Well, at international levels, since 2015, the international community has been increasing efforts through new practices, rules, and commitments, such as the Paris Agreement, to tackle climate change and improve transition readiness towards a net zero economy in order to secure resilience for a sustainable future for all of us. At European level, the EU is a front runner when it comes to climate action and has been introducing several regulations and directives towards the implementation of the Paris Agreement and the EU Green Deal, and has just finished the consultation phase for the introduction of a new regulation on ESG rating in 2023. At national level, we see that ESG integration is becoming a standard practice in lending and investing and the supply chain. And we have seen new regulatory requirements, such as the introduction of the upcoming national climate law. So in their turn, banks, investors, and the supply chain in Greece require now from companies of all sizes to report ESG data to evaluate their ESG performance, especially those operating in carbon-intensive sectors, such as the energy sector. As a result, we realize that market participants need the essential knowledge and tools to comply with the evolving regulatory requirements, ensure access to finance and sustainable finance opportunities in detail, and enhance their competitiveness in the market. So, Global Sustain has a multi-year experience in sustainability and ESG assessment methods. Furthermore, we have developed digital applications in cooperations with global market leaders such as the Ebrd and Moody's Analytics to help financial institutions and companies understand, assess, and manage ESG risks, and of course, seize new financing opportunities. So, I will open the full screen now to be more clear. Okay, so Global Sustain Rating is a comprehensive application for the collection, analysis, and evaluation of non-financial data. The application has been developed to be used by all types of entities, such as companies and organizations, regardless of size and industry, banks and fund providers, such as investment companies and fund management companies, for the evaluation of business, credit, and investment decisions. The ESG questionnaire included in the application and the export of Global Sustain Rating has been developed according to our multi-year experience working with companies of all sizes, including SMEs, international financial institutions, and rating agencies in Greece and abroad. The questionnaires selected for the evaluation have taken into account international EU and national standards, guidelines, regulations, and circulars, such as the EU taxonomy, the SFDR, CSRD, and CSDD regulations, in conjunction with national laws and regulations on corporate governance code. Some of the unique characteristics of the applications is the existence of the monitoring multi-stakeholder rating committee, including regulators, investors, bankers, and auditors. Another important feature is the assessment of the entity's environmental and social risk category automatically by the application in accordance with the NACE classification and the ENS standards of international financial institutions in order to monitor alignment with the EU taxonomy regulation. Another feature is the ESG regulatory compliance check, which is very important, especially for companies in the energy sector that are in the microscope of lenders and investors. The provision of alerts and recommended actions is also an important feature to help small and medium enterprises, especially, to apply a holistic ESG action plan. The questionnaire is adapted to the capacity and data availability of SMEs and is also applicable to corporates, financial institutions, and public bodies. The application has multiple functionalities such as the submission of multiple and repetitive evaluation per year, the upload of attachments and comments, the identification and mapping of stakeholders, the risks and business opportunities identification based on the Sustainable Development Goals, and the export of reports to regulators, lenders, and investors. Later, we will see how the application also generates quantitative and qualitative data results. Okay, so let's see now how the user can use the Global Sustain Rating application in 6 simple steps. First of all, the user registers for free and enters their commercial financial data to activate their membership. The application then generates automatically the entity's environmental and social risk category in accordance with the international standards of international financial institutions and their NACE codes. Then the users enter their data when it comes to stakeholders to develop an explicit stakeholder engagement plan. They've moved to environmental data, social, and governance. At any time, the users can have access to quantitative and qualitative data, such as unanswered questions, ESG KPIs, and the metrics to learn how they are calculated and be exported for use at the entity level. They can export alerts generated by the application to address these issues, recommended actions, as well as the difficulty level per action to apply a customized ESG action plan, and their ESG evaluation with a score and rating methodology, transparent in the platform. Moreover, the users can have access to multiple dashboards to check their rating history and industry benchmarking. So the final step is the development and export of their ESG certificate that is valid for 1 year. One very important characteristic of the application is the export of reports in an editable format, which can be used as input and evaluation data for business, credit, investment decisions, due diligence controls of the supply chain, and the submission of data and reports to supervisory and regulatory authorities such as YEMI in Greece. The application's methodology is transparent in the platform, and the annual membership includes multiple functionalities and options, including a third-party confirmation of the submitted data. The application will be available in a cloud environment and offered as software as a service. It will be officially launched in the Greek market on July 12th, and it will be available at rating.globalsustain.org. We would like to hear any questions if you have, and we remain at your disposal for any further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yalma. I would like to ask you, actually, I would have a question. Let's pretend for a moment that I don't know a lot about this, the rating. And I would like to ask you, we are discussing about the Green Deal. What is the importance in this road of such a rating, and what is, if you could tell us about what is the stage that Greece is currently in basically applying such a rating? How widespread is it?
Well, as we see the evolving, as I mentioned, the evolving regulatory requirements make banks, investors, and the supply chain to ask for ESG data from their clients and companies of all sizes. So it is very important for all companies to evaluate their ESG performance and first of all understand the value of having an improvement of their business decisions when it comes to environment, social, and corporate governance. So I believe that according to the current market challenges and demands at international, EU, and national levels, it is very important that we provide, such as Global Sustain, to provide the necessary tools to help market participants to respond to these challenges. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Yes, great. Now it worked. So thank you very much. As I said, that's very useful. That's very interesting to hear. We will also have some minutes for questions at the end towards the speakers. So I would like to ask if Mr. Tsifoutidis would be...
Yes.
Yes, great.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm ready. I apologize once again. So, there we go.
Taking a look at the clock as well, let's aim for, let's say, the time of 7 minutes.
I'll try my best. Okay, so slideshow. So this is me. I'm going to talk about the geothermal energy in Greece, the prospects and the challenges, because there are some. I work as the acting head of the Geothermal Energy Department with the Directorate General of Mineral Raw Materials. So, some basic premises. The present energy and critical raw materials crisis...
Apologies, I'm sorry to interrupt
yes?
you, but we still cannot see the presentation.
Can you not? It's on my screen at the moment. So
if you maybe we can proceed without the presentation. Let's say
it's on my screen and should be shared by now. I'm trying it once again. There we go. Share again.
Great. Now it's
okay.
Perfect.
Excellent. So I'm starting the presentation with some basic basic premises that. Gosh, I really need to go to the start. I apologize. So there we go. The basic premises. And I wonder if you can see it now. You can't?
No, we can see you.
All right,
no.
There we go again.
Great.
Now then, okay, the present energy and critical raw materials crisis calls once again for energy security, the need for efficiency and the wise use of natural and mineral resources. The action plan for energy and the climate for 2030 that has been established by the government sets specific goals on reducing emissions, energy efficiencies, saving of resources and sustainable development. And geothermal energy, as many people perhaps don't know, is a renewable energy source that has the smallest CO2 footprint among other renewable sources. It offers power base load, which is very important. It is cheap by comparison, it is safe, and it can provide important opportunities for local sustainable growth and diversification of local products, and I'll come back to that later. The geothermal heat pumps, which is another sector geothermal energy is an important tool for energy efficiency, energy cost savings, and it's growing. So, is there geothermal energy in Greece? Yes. Do many people know about it? Not enough. So, where are we now? Okay, so here is a chart from the International Energy Agency that shows the relative needs for some critical materials per renewable sources. As you can see, geothermal energy is one of the least demanding by comparison. You can see the battery storage, or perhaps the wind farms that are quite mineral, quite critical raw materials demanding, very intensive metallurgy involved, and that perhaps doesn't make it as green by comparison. And we also have to keep in mind that the more dependent we are on critical materials, the more we increase our dependency from non-EU countries. And I believe that Professor Maniatis has published recently in the press some rather interesting charts that prove that. Now then, as a footnote, I mentioned that nickel and chrome are available in Greece and can be mined. So then, what is happening around us? These are the top 10 geothermal countries in 2021. You can see our neighboring Turkey with 1.7 gigawatts of installed capacity. And we must understand that this is a capacity that produces 100% what it says, not whenever it blows the wind or whenever we have sunshine. So the only thing is that geothermal energy doesn't flow just anywhere, and there have to be some specific geological conditions that will allow the transfer of Earth's heat close to the surface. And this potential is manifested in Greece, mainly in Central and East Macedonia, in Thrace, in certain islands along some very deep faults, geological faults, and the present and past volcanic arcs. It doesn't have to do with volcanoes, okay? It's just the geological term, so don't be alarmed about that. So many countries have similar features, taking full advantage of the base load capacity that geothermal stations that they have already put in place offer. And Turkey shares many common geological features with Greek islands in the east and northeastern Aegean Sea, and soon may surpass the 2 gigawatts in installed capacity. So where are we in Greece now? Well, there is a map that has been set out by the National Authority of Geological and Mineral Exploration, formerly known as IGME, back in 2010. From 2010 until today, there have been no new high temperature discoveries. And the emphasis has been given on low temperature to medium temperature exploration and exploitation, made mainly in Macedonia, Central Eastern Macedonia, and Thrace. Public Power Corporation Renewables company retains the exploration rights in 4 areas, like the 2 islands of Milos and Kymlos, the Nisyros Island, Lesbos Island, and the peninsula of Methana, but we haven't got any power production as yet. And there are promising areas for high temperature applications, i.e. the Nestos River Delta, the Ebrd River Delta, the Orestias Basin, all those are up north, like the Strymon River Basin, the area near Kavala called Akropotamos, the Chios Island, Samothraki Island, the Susaki not far away from Athens, that could be candidates for exploration and exploitation bids in the near future. Right, where are we at the moment? As it is highlighted at the bottom of the slide, those are rather moderate numbers that reflect the effects of the pandemic on production. Geothermal production is currently limited to small to medium-sized thermal applications, maybe predominantly in the agricultural section. And these are some results, preliminary results from the annual report that we produce at the at the General Directorate of Raw Materials every year. Geothermal heat pumps, on the other hand, are showing some signs of acceleration. We had 45 new licenses in 2020, and there's an increasing number coming in, and our total installed capacity rose to an estimated 182 megawatt thermal, and we're hoping to see that accelerating in the future. So why Greece is lagging behind? What is happening to the expected production? So first of all, let's say the geothermal exploration started late in Greece by comparison to, say, Iceland or Italy in 1970. The Public Power Corporation, the state monopoly at that time, was granted the rights to explore and exploit the geothermal potential in Milos, Nisyros, and Lesbos in the mid-80s. However, a well-known case of mismanagement and of technical problems in Milos led the local community to become more or less hostile, and that spilled over to Nisyros. And the PPC had to cease activities by the mid-90s, unfortunately. The PPC Renewables, daughter company of the PPC, took over in 2011, but equally failed to deliver on time. However, the PPC continued to invest in what I believe they are, less efficient wind and solar farms. There is a change, a very welcome change. In the past 2 years, PPC is reactivated, and we're hopeful that we'll get the first 8 megawatts station in Lesbos, hopefully within the next 2 years. We also should note that in 2012, during the crisis, there's been a bidding round for leasing rights for exploration and exploitation that unfortunately failed to produce results, and we're hoping that any new bids will not share the same fate. The obvious answer to the reason why we don't have any production and we don't have much interest at the moment is because it seemed to be safer to invest and enjoy profits faster in wind and solar farms due to a series of state-driven incentives provided since the mid-2000s. Hence, the relative intermittent productivity of those renewable sources was hedged against losses by state aid, feed-in tariffs, etc. Also, the absence of a major project, the example that we were looking at, led to relative ignorance among the indigenous engineering community and politicians that had come to believe that renewable sources are just solar and wind. And we are hopeful that this is changing gradually as the time goes by. So, geothermal energy is regarded as a mineral source, and that actually puts it apart from other renewable sources. Because it is regarded as a mineral resource, it's pretty much like oil and gas. The rights belong exclusively to the state, and those rights can be leased to applicants following a bidding process. So the regulatory framework in place at the moment is, as you can see, the law 4602, the regulation of geothermal works, the terms and procedures for leasing exploration rights. It's the textbook which we follow for bids for high temperature fields, national interest as we call them, and areas where we don't have any characterizations as yet, non-searched areas. And we are hoping that very soon we shall have in place the terms and conditions for the bidding rounds for the intermediate temperatures fields, which is very important for agricultural and light industrial applications. Now then, geothermal production, as you may understand, as regulated, sits on two boats. It's regulated by two different sets of legislation. As said already, exploration and exploitation of the geothermal potential, i.e. what's below the ground, is governed by the Law 4602 and the derived ministerial decisions. It's more or less the framework of the mineral world, but energy production is licensed and governed by 4658 and the decisions by the Regulatory Authority for Energy and the General Framework for Electric Power Generation and Distribution. This duality sets geothermal energy apart from other RESs. So it has the advantage of the stochastic forms of renewables, as its production is, it produces base load. That is, it has a predictable level of production, a predictable, stable income, but also the remaining energy can be utilized for district heating and other applications before re-injecting the geothermal fluids back into the earth. So an inclusive discussion on special incentives to promote geothermal energy generation is required to start as soon as possible and to amend the existing legislation on renewables so that a level of fair play between the competitors can be established. And I fear to say that the recent decision by RAI to exclude licensed geothermal stations planned for non-connected islands in Lesbos and Niceros shows a relative ignorance on behalf of the authority, and it is counterproductive. So I sincerely hope that they will change their minds soon. So a geothermal investor begins exploration works 5 years earlier than any other investors in renewables. Hence, he has a forward placed larger capex by comparison due to the costs of the exploration. There's geophysical works, wells, boreholes that have to go deep, etc. And of course the uncertainties before an accurate estimate of installed capacity can be made. And therefore the geothermal investor needs incentives to counterbalance the exploration associated risks and the unjust, inequitable head start that other competitors like in wind and solar competitors do enjoy. On the same token, geothermal baseload can be located in many non-interconnected frontline islands like Lesbos, Chios, Samothraki, and Niceros. Hence, its exploitation has the added value that because it promotes energy security in very sensitive areas. And for all the above reasons, it is reasonable to ask that at least all applications linked to geothermal energy production, from the certification of special projects to operation license, are granted priority by the competent authorities and participate in similar state aid schemes. So, geothermal energy makes sense everywhere. From Paris, where 2 million people enjoy heating from geothermal wells, to Munich, they're doing more or less the same. From other parts, from all the way to Alberta in Canada, from Cornwall to Alberta, from Mexico to Slovakia, from Alexandroupolis, as I said, that we are hopeful to have the first district heating project in Greece, to Tura in Slovakia. There are investors that are looking in cheap district heating, baseload power generation, as well as seeking important minerals that come as byproduct, such as lithium extraction. And in the pictures you can see two examples. One is in the faraway called Iceland, and the one is nearby, not far away from Niceros Island. The site is in Turkey. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask, keeping in mind that we're over time, I would like to ask two questions. Very briefly, if you could answer us. So, as you discussed also, there was this attempt to create these projects in Niceros and Milos. Yes. They didn't work out. And how we know that there is this kind of not in my backyard mindset for most renewables and non-renewables things.
Yes.
First of all, what would be, how is the average person going to be convinced that there is no danger anymore, so there is not going to be dangerous gases released? And
So,
yeah, so
yes.
sorry, the second part of the
Yes.
question is, keeping that in mind, if this all works out, if you had to give a number in 2050, let's say we are in a net zero future, what would be the percentage that Greece could have in electricity production?
All right. Now let's start from the latter. We know from studies that Greece is capable of producing at least 1 gigawatt of electric power, and a lot more in thermal. The two examples can be explained. However, people are inviting us to step up the pressure on PPCR in Lesbos. We had letters from the local authorities in Samothraki. So there are other parts in Greece that are more receptive, if you like, less. I'm trying to use the right word. They're not as fearful. There has been a lot of reasons for Milos. There have been technical problems. PPC didn't have the mentality to organize the work with backup plans, and the delay in decision making, which is critical in projects like that. That's why I compared right at the start geothermal energy with oil and gas. And when you drill with oil and gas, you need to be fast. You need to be able to take decisions on the spot. And that mentality didn't exist in PPC, from what I understand and from what I know. And things exacerbated, and the people became hostile, and that spilled over to Niceros. But those are two examples, and there are plenty more examples in the area of Negrita, in Ceres, in Xanthi, in Alexandroupolis. People are looking forwards. So hopefully, when we have the good results, people in Milos and later on the people in Niceros may reconsider.
Thank you very much. Great. So, concluding with Mr. Zifoutidis, I would like to give the stage to Mr. Katsigiannis.
May I add something?
Of course.
If you can hear me. There is a major difference nowadays. Let's not forget that those technical problems occurred in the mid-80s, late 80s. The technology has changed completely. And from neighboring Turkey, there hasn't been an incident that we've heard of. In Italy, in Iceland, in the United States, but also in Kenya. Kenya is advancing very fast. So technology has made geothermal energy exploration and exploitation something very safe nowadays. So thank you very much.
Great, and that's a point. Does technology catch up with regulation or the opposite? That's, another topic, I think, for another discussion. Thank you very much. Mr. Katsigiannis, and apologies if, understanding that we're a bit over time, if you could keep it, at 7 minutes, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Yannis Katsigiannis. I'm working in the Hellenic Mediterranean University, and I am a last-minute change for Professor Karapidakis, which is initially planned to present the stuff. So, the presentation is quite big, but I will pass a lot of slides, so I will think that we will be in time. Regarding Cretan energy systems, we can divide it in 3 basic types of energy: electricity, heat, and transportation. And in terms of the Cretan energy system, we can divide it to the energy sources. We can be conventional fuels or renewable energy sources. The factor of transmission and energy conversion, we can complete the supply chain, transmission lines for electricity, energy storage systems, which they plan to play a very significant role in the operation of a power system in general. Steam turbines and internal combustion engines, electric generators, and photovoltaics, which has a completely different technology and are not based to conventional electric generators such as wind turbines, for example. The end use of the Cretan system contains the space heating and cooling. Here, geothermal play a significant role, for example, the electricity and the transportation in general. So, if we go there, we can see that if we consider that the electricity consumption of the Cretan power system is around 3 terawatt-hours per year, and we add the heat and the transportation energy needs, and we also take into account some efficiencies, typical efficiencies, we can say that the whole three categories consume approximately 5 terawatt-hours per year, while the energy needs, taking into account the efficiencies, is about 7.5 terawatt-hours, considering that a large part of them in the future will be based on electricity. This happens for the heat, especially for cooling, and is expected to be increased. And this is expected to be increased significantly also in transportation with the integration of electric vehicles. There are some initial calculations about the ability of the Cretan system to, about the renewable source penetration, take into account the first connection with the Peloponnesos, which is from a high voltage AC system of 150 megawatts, and the future interconnection with Athens with a high voltage DC cable of 1000 megawatts. So there are some scenarios which include a large penetration of renewable energy sources, take into account energy and power balance. These are some preliminary calculations. Take into account some typical efficiencies for wind turbines and photovoltaics in Cretan Island. In order to cover the energy needs of 3 terawatt-hours per year, it may be covered by a combination of 1,000 megawatts of wind turbine plus 400 megawatts of photovoltaics. Take into account the weak interconnection, as we call it. There are some also sensitivity analysis here, but I think that the more interesting here is first that the photovoltaics in each scenario, the capacity of photovoltaics can be considered in different ways. The first way is some large installation of photovoltaics, for example, 100 kilowatt parks that happens in Crete. The limit is 80 kilowatts, but it's the same order of magnitude. And the other is to decrease the installation size of each photovoltaic park, for example, photovoltaic in roofs, and increase also the number of installations. A very interesting topic in this subject is what storage we need in order to include the renewable energy sources, because we know that the basic disadvantage of wind turbines photovoltaic is their intermittency. They are not following the load curve, so we need large amounts of energy storage. According to the preliminary calculations, for the current needs, storage of 500 megawatts and 4 gigawatt hours of total capacity may cover these needs of today. Also, take into account double interconnection with the high voltage DC cable that are connected with Athens. We can achieve an almost 100% of energy balance through renewable energy sources and the needed amount of storage, of course. There are some statistical data, brief statistical data about the market clearing price and how it has been increased the last 18 months. Of course, there was a big boom after the Ukrainian war, but there was also a tendency to increase it before this. If we compare it with January of 2021, the market clearing price has been increased around 5 times. And here there is some comparison with the mean European market clearing price, which in Greece is in the majority of cases significantly higher. If I remember well, yes, in this slide, Greece is, for May, it was the third most expensive country of Europe. Some data about the energy data that we have after the Cretan interconnection that start to begin on the last summer, but the first fully working day was at the beginning of November of 2021. And in the energy balance and needs pie, there was a new data, a new field, which also contained the imports of energy that we have from the AC interconnector from Peloponnesos. This day, the imports, the 1st of November, which was the first day of full operation, was around 7%. Mazout, which is heavy oil, is still the biggest part of energy consumption in Crete now, up more than 50%. Also, we have diesel. The penetration of renewable energy sources was above 20%, around 25%, which is the typical penetration of renewable energy sources in Crete on an annual basis. Some interesting data about the production of the Cretan power system with the interconnector line. In the majority of cases, there is import of electricity, but in some specific hours of some specific days, we may find some exports when the renewable, the installed capacity of wind turbines mainly and photovoltaics are very high, and they are exported to the mainland of Greece. In the lower side of this diagram, you can see with exports the gray zones that are below zero. This means export to the mainland power system. And here there is a zoom that focus more on a specific day which we have very high renewable energy penetration. This is not a typical day, but even with this structure, the penetration of renewable energy sources in Crete at a specific hour peaked at 56%, which is a very high number. Some description of the geographical electricity consumption in Crete per type of use and per municipalities of Crete. There are some Greek letters that I couldn't change, but I can translate to you. begin with the blue is domestic, this is commercial, the yellow, this is industrial, the 6% is agricultural, 8% is public services and buildings, and 2% is public lighting. And these last two fields are quite interesting because it is quite easy to take measure and to increase the energy efficiency in these two fields. Although the overall percentage is not the highest, it is very easy to decrease the energy consumption in these two fields by several types of measures. Needed steps to the climatic neutrality. This is not only applicable for Crete, but for the majority of the cases. A large number of renewable energy source installations, mainly wind turbines and photovoltaics, probably some hydro, combined with hydro pump storage, probably hydrogen in the future, large scale of energy storage, it is needed when we have significant renewable energy source penetration. Demand side management and energy efficiency, this is very crucial, and it has not developed so much in Greece, but we expect to have a significant development in the following year. Small-scale renewable energy resources, in order to the variation of this installation to be greater, this is also good for the power system operation. The need for auto-producers and energy community, and of course, reliable infrastructure, which is critical, which has a critical value in this analysis. Energy storage systems is essential for the operation of such a system, and this storage system can be installed not only with power units, but in the distribution mailing system for network support, and in smaller capacities in behind-the-meter systems in order to probably load shift the consumption of a consumer. And this is a similar diagram that shows the installation of batteries in the different parts of the power system. And by finalizing this presentation, the energy storage system can include pumped hydro storage systems. This was a very popular option 10 to 15 years ago, but there are some significant limitations regarding the space needed, some other problems that may arise. So this is not the main case today. There are some installations that we expect to start working the following years, but the majority of the installations now, in smaller scale, but in much larger number, is batteries, are more flexible, they have direct installations, they need significantly less special requirements. Their lifetimes are relatively smaller. Good battery systems have lifetimes of 10 to 15 years. Another option that is expected to be more significant in the following years, and there was a very interesting session yesterday for this, was hydrogen. Just to mention that in the case of energy storage system, we need, depending on our needs, we need to think the cost of power as well the cost of energy we need. And this may lead us to a mix of energy storage systems that fulfill our expectation with the least cost. So, this was my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will have some points later on the interconnectors. Now, if you, of course, if you'd like to join us for the roundtable. Before I move forward to the next two presentations we have, if the colleagues will allow us to go a bit over time, please let us know. Yeah, so then I would like to invite Ms. Maria Apostolaki from the region of Crete to take the presentation.
Καλησπέρα σας. Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ για την πρόσκληση. Σας ευχαριστώ για τη δυνατότητα που μου δίνετε να παρουσιάσω τις προσπάθειες που κάνουμε στην περιφέρεια Κρήτης για να κάνουμε το νησί μας πράσινο και ανθεκτικό. Θα προσπαθήσω να μοιραστώ την οθόνη μου μαζί σας. Πείτε μου αν την βλέπετε την παρουσίαση.
Ναι, ναι.
Ωραία. Λοιπόν, όπως σας είπα, θα σας πω τις προσπάθειες που γίνονται στην περιφέρεια για να την μετατρέψουμε σε πράσινη και ανθεκτική περιφέρεια. Οι προκλήσεις που αντιμετωπίζουμε είναι αυτά που συζητάμε τις τελευταίες 3 μέρες στα πλαίσια του συνεδρίου. Είναι η κλιματική αλλαγή και η ενεργειακή κρίση, που σαφώς αποτελούν προκλήσεις που χρήζουν άμεσης αντιμετώπισης, αλλά ταυτόχρονα θα μπορούσαν να θεωρηθούν και μια ευκαιρία για να οικοδομήσουμε ένα καλύτερο μέλλον για όλους μας. Και κάπως έτσι το βλέπουμε εμείς στην περιφέρεια Κρήτης. Η Κρήτη, ξέρετε, είναι μια περιοχή όπου οι επιπτώσεις από την κλιματική αλλαγή θα είναι ιδιαίτερα έντονες και επιπλέον η ενεργειακή ασφάλεια είναι ένας παράγοντας κλειδί για τη βιώσιμη ανάπτυξη της τοπικής κοινωνίας και της τοπικής οικονομίας. Έτσι, εμείς στην περιφέρεια Κρήτης προσπαθούμε να ανταποκριθούμε στις προκλήσεις της κλιματικής αλλαγής, να συμβάλλουμε με τον τρόπο που μπορούμε στην ενεργειακή μετάβαση της χώρας και γι' αυτό συνεργαζόμαστε, συντονίζουμε, προωθούμε και υλοποιούμε δράσεις για τη μείωση των εκπομπών του αερίου του θερμοκηπίου, την αύξηση της συμμετοχής των ανανεώσιμων πηγών ενέργειας στο ενεργειακό μας μείγμα και τη βελτίωση της ενεργειακής απόδοσης. Σαφώς και ακολουθούμε τις ευρωπαϊκές και τις εθνικές οδηγίες. Και με αυτές, σαν γνώμονα, ηγούμαστε πρωτοβουλειών προκειμένου η Κρήτη να γίνει μια πράσινη και ανθεκτική περιοχή, ενδυναμώνοντας τους πολίτες και συντονίζοντας δράσεις σε βασικούς τομείς όπως ενεργειακή απόδοση, μετριασμός και προσαρμογή στην κλιματική αλλαγή, κυκλική οικονομία και καινοτομία. Βασικό σημείο για μας, για την ενεργειακή ασφάλεια του νησιού, είναι η διασύνδεσή μας με την υπηρετική χώρα. Αποτελεί ένα εθνικό έργο, το οποίο σχεδιάζεται χρόνια, συζητιέται χρόνια και επιτέλους είναι στη φάση της υλοποίησης. Ήδη έχει ολοκληρωθεί κατά το ίμιση η διασύνδεση των Χανίων με την Πελοπόννησο και μέχρι το τέλος του 2024 αναμένουμε να ολοκληρωθεί και η δεύτερη φάση της διασύνδεσης Κορακιά με την Αττική. Αυτό το μεγάλο έργο, για μας ακόμα μεγαλύτερο, θα σημάνει τη σταδιακή επεξάρτησή μας από τα ορυκτά καύσιμα και από τις τοπικές ρηπογόνες μονάδες που υπάρχουν αυτή τη στιγμή στο νησί για την παραγωγή της ενέργειας και την κάλυψη των ενεργειακών μας αναγκών. Λόγω της γεωπολιτικής θέσης της Κρήτης, εκτός από την εθνική διασύνδεση, η Κρήτη παίζει βασικό ρόλο και για περισσότερες ευρωπαϊκές διασυνδέσεις. Ακούσαμε την πρώτη μέρα την Γενική Γραμματεία, την κυρία Σδούκου, αλλά και τον Υπουργό από την Αίγυπτο να αναφέρουν ένα project που μελετούν και συζητούν τώρα σχετικά με τη διασύνδεση της Κρήτης με την Αφρική. Και φυσικά είναι η διασύνδεσή μας με την Κύπρο, η οποία βρίσκεται στη φάση της αδειοδότησης, το γνωστό ευρωπαϊκό project, το Eurasia Interconnection. Οι διασυνδέσεις φυσικά ξέρουμε όλοι ότι δεν είναι τοπικό project, δεν είναι περιφερειακό έργο, είναι ευρωπαϊκό ή εθνικό. Αλλά η περιφέρεια Κρήτης είναι παρούσα στη φάση του σχεδιασμού της. Είμαστε σε στενή συνεργασία και με την κεντρική κυβέρνηση και με όλους τους εμπλεκόμενους φορείς, γιατί είναι υποχρέωσή μας να μεταφέρουμε τους προβληματισμούς και τις ανησυχίες της τοπικής κοινωνίας και σαφώς να διασφαλίσουμε τους παραγωγικούς τομείς του νησιού, το φυσικό μας περιβάλλον, την πολιτιστική κληρονομιά και γενικότερα την ευημερία των πολιτών μας και της κοινωνίας της Κρήτης.
Κυρία Αποστολάκη, δεν προχωράει η παρουσίασή σας.
Αλήθεια. Σε ποια σελίδα έχει μείνει?
Στην πρώτη.
Πρώτη. Να την διακόψω και να το ξαναρχίσω, το διαμοιρασμό της οθόνης.
Νομίζω μπορούμε να συνεχίσουμε με από το slide που είσαστε. Ναι.
Τώρα, πώς τη βλέπετε?
Ναι.
Ναι. Ωραία, ευχαριστώ. Λοιπόν, έλεγα για την ανάπτυξη των ΑΠΕ ότι προωθείται πολύ η περαιτέρω υλοποίηση των ΑΠΕ στο ενεργειακό μείγμα και της χώρας και της Ευρώπης. Οι στόχοι που τίθενται είναι πλέον υψηλότεροι και φυσικά η Κρήτη συμμετέχει σε αυτό. Η Κρήτη προωθεί την ανάπτυξη των ΑΠΕ, γιατί η προτεραιότητά μας είναι η δημιουργία ενός περιβάλλοντος ενεργειακής ασφάλειας για το νησί. Όμως, είναι και η προτεραιότητά μας η ανάπτυξη αυτή των ΑΠΕ να γίνει με τρόπο βιώσιμο και με τρόπο κοινωνικά δίκαιο. Αναγνωρίζουμε, και θα πρέπει να αναγνωρίζετε από όλους, ότι η βασική προϋπόθεση για την ανάπτυξη των έργων ΑΠΕ είναι η κοινωνική αποδοχή και επίσης η μέγιστη δυνατή συμμετοχή της τοπικής κοινωνίας και της τοπικής οικονομίας σε τέτοια έργα. Γνωρίζουμε τη σημασία της συνεργασίας και της συμμετοχής όλων των ενδιαφερόμενων φορέων και των πολιτών στην ενεργειακή μετάβαση του νησιού και έτσι η Περιφέρεια Κρήτης υποστηρίζει και διευκολύνει και προωθεί την ίδρυση ενεργειακών κοινοτήτων, αυτή τη νέα μορφή συνεργασίας που οδηγεί σε ενεργειακά συλλογικά έργα με γνώμονα τους πολίτες, με κοινωνικά και αναπτυξιακά ωφέλη, καταρχήν για την τοπική κοινωνία. Η Περιφέρεια Κρήτης συμμετέχει ενεργά σε όλες τις ενεργειακές κοινότητες που έχουν ιδρυθεί αυτή τη στιγμή στην Κρήτη, ενισχύοντας έτσι την ενεργειακή δημοκρατία και τη μετάβαση σε μια παικτική και δίκαιη κοινωνία. Όσον αφορά την ενεργειακή αποδοτικότητα, ακούσαμε και την πρώτη μέρα από την κυρία Σδούκου ότι είναι ίσως ο μοναδικός τρόπος να θωρακιστούμε απέναντι στις ενεργειακές προκλήσεις και απέναντι στις κλιματικές προκλήσεις. Και όντως η αύξηση της ενεργειακής απόδοσης είναι αυτή που θα καταστήσει τις υποδομές μας και τα κτίρια μας πιο ανθεκτικά απέναντι σε αυτές τις προκλήσεις. Και έτσι, στα πλαίσια αυτά, η Περιφέρεια Κρήτης ενισχύει την ενεργειακή απόδοση των κτιρίων και των υποδομών μέσω συνεργασιών με τους δημόσιους φορείς του νησιού, προκειμένου τα δημόσια κτίρια και οι ενεργοβόρες υποδομές να μετατραπούν σε ενεργειακά πιο αποδοτικές. Επίσης, διευκολύνει τις προσπάθειες που γίνονται από όλους τους φορείς για τη βελτίωση της ενεργειακής απόδοσης και τη μείωση της κατανάλωσης ενέργειας των κτίριων του δημοσίου τομέα και βοηθά τους δημόσιους φορείς προς αυτή την κατεύθυνση με κάθε μέσο, είτε είναι τεχνικό είτε είναι χρηματοδοτικό. Στην παρούσα φάση προετοιμάζουμε για υλοποίηση την ενεργειακή αναβάθμιση όλων των δομών υγείας του νησιού, κέντρα υγείας και νοσοκομεία, καθώς και μεγάλα και ενεργοβόρα δημόσια κτίρια. Και τέλος, συνεργαζόμαστε με τους δήμους του νησιού, προκειμένου να αναβαθμίσουν ενεργειακά το δίκτυο οδοφωτισμού τους, με σκοπό τόσο τη μείωση της κατανάλωσης ενέργειας, όσο και την αύξηση της οδικής ασφάλειας για τους κατοίκους και τους επισκέπτες του νησιού. Στον τομέα της προσαρμογής στην κλιματική αλλαγή, ο περιφερειακός σχεδιασμός μας βρίσκεται στην τελική φάση της έγκρισης και μάλιστα είμαστε και η πρώτη περιφέρεια στην Ελλάδα που είμαστε σε αυτή τη φάση. Ο στόχος του περιφερειακού σχεδιασμού είναι η θωράκιση του νησιού, των παραγωγικών τομέων, του περιβάλλοντος και της κοινωνίας απέναντι στις κλιματικές και περιβαλλοντικές προκλήσεις. Για την ανάπτυξη του περιφερειακού σχεδιασμού της Κρήτης, μια ομάδα από 36 ειδικούς, καθηγητές και ερευνητές συνεργάστηκε, προκειμένου να αξιολογηθούν οι αλλαγές που θα επέλθουν τις επόμενες δεκαετίες στην Κρήτη, να εντοπιστούν οι 14 βασικοί τομείς που θα επηρεαστούν περισσότερο από τις επιπτώσεις της κλιματικής αλλαγής, αλλά και να προσδιοριστούν ακριβώς συγκεκριμένες γεωγραφικές περιοχές του νησιού, στις οποίες θα πρέπει να δοθεί προτεραιότητα. Έγινε προορισμός και ιεράρχηση των απαραίτητων μέτρων και δράσεων για την προσαρμογή στην κλιματική αλλαγή για τα επόμενα 5 έως 15 χρόνια, από όπου προέκυψαν 228 συγκεκριμένες δράσεις ως προτεραιότητα για τη θωράκιση του νησιού από τις επιπτώσεις βραχυπρόθεσμα έως το 2035. Οι δράσεις αυτές περιλαμβάνουν μελέτες, έργα, έρευνα, προμήθεια εξοπλισμού, κίνητρα, ενημέρωση, παρακολούθηση και αποζημίωση. Ενώ στα πλαίσια του σχεδιασμού εντοπίστηκαν και όλα τα πιθανά χρηματοδοτικά προγράμματα για την υλοποίηση αυτών των δράσεων, καθώς και ποιοι είναι οι δυνητικοί δικαιούχοι. Στον τομέα της κυκλικής οικονομίας έχει ανατεθεί από την Περιφέρεια Κρήτης η εκπόνηση μιας ειδικής μελέτης για την υλοποίηση δράσεων κυκλικής οικονομίας. Η μελέτη αυτή επικεντρώνεται στον αγροδιατροφικό και τον τουριστικό τομέα, που αποτελούν και τους βασικούς άξονες προτεραιότητας για το νησί μας. Η ένταξη της κυκλικής οικονομίας στην Κρήτη είναι ευθυγραμμισμένη με όλα τα περιφερειακά, στρατηγικά και επιχειρησιακά σχέδια δράσης, καθώς και τα αναπτυξιακά προγράμματα που περιλαμβάνουν το νησί μας. Η μελέτη διερευνά με άμεση συνεργασία με τους εμπλεκόμενους φορείς και τις επιχειρήσεις αυτών των δύο κλάδων και καταγράφει τις ανάγκες τους και έπειτα εντοπίζει τις ευκαιρίες για υλοποίηση δράσεων κυκλικής οικονομίας στην Κρήτη. Στον τομέα του τουρισμού, οι δράσεις της κυκλικής οικονομίας επικεντρώνονται στις κτηριακές υποδομές και τον εξοπλισμό που χρησιμοποιείται σε αυτές, στα τρόφιμα και τη σωστή διαχείριση των παραγόμενων απορριμμάτων, το περιβαλλοντικό τους αποτύπωμα και την κατανάλωση νερού και ενέργειας. Στον αγροδιατροφικό τομέα, οι δράσεις της κυκλικής οικονομίας περιλαμβάνουν δίκτυα πρωτογενούς και δευτερογενούς παραγωγής αγροδιατροφικών προϊόντων, οικονομία τεχνολογικού διαμοιρασμού, τεχνολογίες αιχμής για την παραγωγή πρώτων υλών υψηλής προστιθέμενης αξίας, καθώς και ανάπτυξη αξιακών αλυσίδων. Με βάση τα αποτελέσματα που θα προκύψουν από αυτή τη μελέτη, η οποία είναι ακόμα σε φάση της εκπόνησης, θα προκύψουν προσκλήσεις χρηματοδότησης από το Περιφερειακό Επιχειρησιακό Πρόγραμμα και το Πρόγραμμα Περιφερειακής Ανάπτυξης για χρηματοδότηση των επιχειρήσεων των δύο αυτών τομέων προτεραιότητας για την υλοποίηση των δράσεων της κυκλικής οικονομίας. Αναφορικά με την καινοτομία τώρα και για διευκόλυνση και επιτάχυνση της συνεργασίας του ακαδημαϊκού κόσμου με τις επιχειρήσεις για την ανάπτυξη καινοτόμων τεχνολογιών και έξυπνων λύσεων, δημιουργήθηκε στην περιφέρεια Κρήτης ένα επιχειρηματικό παρατηρητήριο καινοτομίας. Στο πλαίσιο της υλοποίησης της στρατηγικής μας για την έξυπνη εξειδίκευση, το παρατηρητήριο αυτό αποτελεί ένα δυναμικό κόμβο για τη δημιουργία νέων επιχειρηματικών ευκαιριών, ενισχύοντας το συγκριτικό πλεονέκτημα του νησιού και την οικονομική αυτάρκεια. Το παρατηρητήριο ουσιαστικά είναι μια νέα δομή που στοχεύει στην ενημέρωση των εταιριών, στην παρακολούθηση της επιχειρηματικότητας, στη συνεργασία μεταξύ εταιριών, στη συνεργασία ερευνητικών και εκπαιδευτικών ιδρυμάτων με εταιρείες, στην καινοτομία και στην προώθηση όλων των στόχων της στρατηγικής έκθεσης.
Τα χαμηλά στα ηχεία της.
Και τελειώνοντας, δεν θα μπορούσα να παραλείψω να αναφέρω τις συνεργασίες μας με Ευρωπαίους εταίρους μέσα από τη συμμετοχή μας σε δίκτυα και σε έργα της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης, σε ευρωπαϊκά έργα, στους τομείς ενεργειακή απόδοση, κυκλική οικονομία, τουρισμό, βιωσιμότητα, περιβαλλοντική αποκατάσταση, ενεργειακή μετάβαση, κλιματική αλλαγή και άλλους τομείς. Ο σκοπός μας είναι να ανταλλάξουμε εμπειρίες με άλλες ευρωπαϊκές περιφέρειες σχετικά με τις βασικές προκλήσεις που αντιμετωπίζουμε όλοι οι Ευρωπαίοι, να αποκτήσουμε γνώση σχετικά με τους αποτελεσματικούς τρόπους που χρησιμοποιούν άλλες περιφέρειες για να αντιμετωπίσουν αυτές τις προκλήσεις και τελικά να μπορέσουμε να προτείνουμε και να εισάγουμε στην τοπική κοινωνία λύσεις που ενισχύουν την περιφερειακή ανάπτυξη, τη βιωσιμότητα και την κοινωνικο-οικονομική ευημερία της Κρήτης. Εντάχει θα σας αναφέρω τα ενεργειακά έργα που υλοποιούμε αυτή τη στιγμή, ξεκινώντας από το Robinson, Smart Integration of Local Energy Sources and Innovative Storage for Flexible, Secure and Cost-Efficient Energy Supply on Industrialized Islands. Το Robinson υλοποιείται στα πλαίσια του προγράμματος Horizon 2020 και ο σκοπός του είναι να αναπτύξει ένα ολοκληρωμένο ενεργειακό σύστημα για να βοηθήσει τα νησιά στη μείωση της εξάρτησής τους από τα ορυκτά καύσιμα, διασφαλίζοντας μια καθαρή, ασφαλή και οικονομικά αποδοτική παροχή ενέργειας μέσω του συνδυασμού των υποδομών παραγωγής και αποθήκευσης ανανεώσιμων πηγών ενέργειας. Σε αυτό το έργο συνεργαζόμαστε 18 εταίροι συνολικά για την ανάπτυξη ενός ολοκληρωμένου, έξυπνου και ενωτόμου και οικονομικά αποδοτικού συστήματος ενέργειας που θα συνδέει θερμικά και ηλεκτρικά δίκτυα που θα βελτιστοποιούν τη χρήση των τοπικών ανανεώσιμων πηγών ενέργειας. Μία εφαρμογή, πρακτική εφαρμογή, πιλωτική εφαρμογή θα γίνει και στην Κρήτη. Και η Περιφέρεια Κρήτης είναι σε στενή συνεργασία και πολύ καλή συνεργασία με το Πολυτεχνείο Κρήτης, που αποτελεί επίσης εταίρο του έργου, προκειμένου να υποφεληθούμε πραγματικά με την ολοκλήρωση της μελέτης αναπαραγωγής των αποτελεσμάτων του έργου στην Κρήτη. Δύο έργα του Interreg Europe, το Rebus, Renovation for Energy Efficient Buildings, και το Clean Technologies and Open Innovation for Low Carbon Regions, υλοποιούνται αυτή τη στιγμή στην περιφέρεια. Και ο στόχος και των δύο έργων είναι η αύξηση της ενεργειακής αποδοτικότητας και η επίτευξη με τον καλύτερο τρόπο των στόχων της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης για την ενεργειακή αποδοτικότητα στα κτίρια. Στοχεύουν στην βελτίωση των ικανοτήτων των δημοσίων αρχών στις περιφέρειες της Ευρώπης να αναδείξουν και να προωθήσουν αποτελεσματικές πολιτικές ανακαίνησης στα κτίρια τους να ευαισθητοποιήσουν τους χρήστες των δημοσίων κτηρίων και να αναπτύξουν τις δεξιότητες των φορέων σε θέματα εξοικονόμησης ενέργειας. Στην παρούσα φάση, οι εταίροι των έργων ανταλλάσσουν εμπειρίες σχετικά με τα ενεργειακά μέτρα που εφαρμόστηκαν στις περιφέρειές τους για να αντιμετωπίσουν τις επιπτώσεις της πανδημίας, όπου άλλαξε τελείως η χρήση των κτηρίων, όπως ξέρετε, και διερευνούμε τα...
Συγγνώμη για την διακοπή. Έχουμε βγει λίγο εκτός χρόνου και θέλω να δώσω την ευκαιρία και στους... Συγγνώμη για την διακοπή. Η τεχνολογία δεν είναι φίλος μας από ό,τι φαίνεται.
Ωραία. Έχω ολοκληρώσει. Και το Strategy με αφορμή το οποίο αναβαθμίζουμε ενεργειακά το δικτύο της περιφέρειας Κρήτης στο Ηράκλειο. Είναι το πιλωτικό έργο. Και νομίζω ότι είμαι καλυμμένη. Ελπίζω να μην σας κούρασα. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για την προσοχή σας.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Ναι, όπως είπα, ναι, η τεχνολογία αναπτύσσεται ραγδαία. Yeah, so for our last speaker, no pressure.
So, hi everyone. Let me just try and... Hello everyone, I'll try to honor the fact that I am the last speaker of the panel and be as brief as possible. Also, I had prepared my PowerPoint presentation in Greek, but I'll say it in English, so I think we have the best of both worlds. It's an honor for me, Michalis Hadjipanos, Director of New Projects Department of IPTO, to represent my company in this excellent conference here in Crete. And I would like to share with you the vision of IPTO of interconnecting Greece and how we think that we can contribute to the energy transition that we've all been talking about during these 3 days. IPTO, it's the Greek TSO, and we envisage to lead the interconnection of Greek islands. Our €5 billion 10-year plan foresees the electrical interconnection of almost all Greek islands within the next decade. By 2024, we'll have interconnected the totality of Cyclades Islands, 6 of which are already interconnected to the mainland. Also interconnecting Scathos and the Sporades, a small group of islands in the central Aegean, a project that also contributes to the other islands, Skopelos and Alonissos. By 2027, we plan to interconnect the Dodecanese Islands, and by 2029, all the islands in the northeast Aegean, by completing the incorporation of all major island complexes in Aegean through the continent. Additionally, we plan to upgrade existing cable connections of the Ionian Islands that already have been interconnected to mainland Greece through investments of almost €100 million. In the next slide, I think, okay, you can see the map of Greece, along with the connections already described. We think actually of interconnection as main projects of energy transitions. They contribute to the drastic reduction of CO2 emissions. We plan that from 2.8 million tons per year, the CO2 emissions will be zero due to the fossil fuel costly production units on the islands, and to the retirement of 850 megawatt production plants on the islands. That upgrades the touristic product of our islands and causes less let's say, impact for all the visitors and the inhabitants of the islands. It also means cheaper energy for all by drastically reducing the public service fee that it's been charged to the all Greek consumers due to the costly production of the power plants on the islands. And of course, last but not least, increased renewable sources penetration. We think that after the implementation of our 10-year plan, an additional electric space of 17 gigawatts will be freed for renewable sources throughout Greece, and that it surpasses by 2 gigawatt our national goals for energy and climate. Here we can see a graph depicting the electrical space that we plan to free by each Greek region by 2030, after the completion of our 10-year plan. I will try to expedite a little bit the slides, and this slide actually describes per project the drastic reduction of CO2 emissions for Cyclades, for Crete, for Dodecanese, and for the north Eastern Aegean. In total, we'll be moving from 2.8 million tons per year in 2018 to 2,400,000 today, with incorporation of the first phase of the Cyclades projects and the small interconnection of Crete, to practically zero by 2029. Our interconnections are regarded not only by us, but in a global perspective, as points of reference. They are characterized by a great degree of complexity. We are speaking of long lengths of cables, both underwater and terrestrial, substations and converter stations of latest technology, state-of-the-art, innovative projects like it's the DC project that I'm very happy here the region of Crete and the General Secretary of our ministry described as most optimistic and one of the biggest projects, not only for Crete but for Greece in general. They are demanding installation needs due to the special profile of the Aegean seabed, and of course architecture and design that respects the environment and the local norms. You can see here in the picture the substation in Naxos, that it totally complies with the local architecture. We have designed our substation in Santorini in order to also totally incorporate with the environment, the architectural aspects of the island, and this is something that we do in all of our projects. As many of our colleagues here describe, the first phase of the Crete interconnection to the mainland, that with the Peloponnese, was completed successfully by 2020. It was a project funded by European funds. It was nominated and won the title of the Project of the Year 2020. It is currently the biggest cable interconnection of 150 kV in the world, almost 180 kilometers. It is the deepest three-pole cable interconnection in the world, with almost 1,000 meters depth, and it uses innovative technology that were used for the first time globally in our project. We are very, very proud of this project. I can tell you more about it, but I'll move on. And of course, the next phase of the interconnection that it's been implemented by our subsidiary Ariadne Interconnection, it's the interconnection of Crete to Attica, the one that we all expect to be finalized by 2024, a project of €1 billion, a project that will end once and for all the energy isolation of the island, and would place the strong foundation for Crete to be an important hub of our system, providing the opportunity for electrical interconnections not only to the mainland but with other networks in the Aegean Sea. And I'm of course referring to the Euroasia project that I will talk to you in a moment. Briefly to discuss, we have two converter stations in Attica and Crete, one 150 kV GIS station in Crete as well, 670 kilometers of cables at 1,200 meters depth, optical fibers to complement the system, land cables. It's a highly complex system, and we are proud that it's founded by the Next Generation EU project, Greece 2.0. Along with this project, there are currently many other projects ongoing in enhancing the transmission system of Crete in order to be able to fully function within the terms that are being created by the two interconnections, upgrading of existing lines, creation of new lines in order to transfer the power from the power generation centers to the consumption centers of the island. I will not spare the details, but I am available for you to discuss more details about the projects of enhancing the transmission system of Crete. Very briefly, to discuss about the interconnection of Cyclades Phase D. It's one of the projects also funded by Greece 2.0 Fund, Next Generation EU. It's going to be finished by 2024, and it's going to complete our goal to interconnect all of Cyclades Islands with Attica. It includes the very touristic island of Santorini, islands of Milos, Folegardros, and Serifos. And it has 370 kilometers of cable system, 4 GIS substation on the islands, and will create a closed loop with Attica. Here on the screen you see the whole Cyclades system as it will be completed by 2024. Last but not least, we have the interconnection of Scathos, a project that I said in the beginning that it's going to be electrified in a couple of days, and it will end the energy isolation of the islands of Scathos and the neighboring islands of the Sporades. The Ionian Islands I spoke again in the beginning. We are upgrading interconnections there, including a brand new interconnection to the island of Corfu, that is going to secure the supply of the island and support the ongoing touristic explosion that is happening there. For the Dodecanese and the northeastern Aegean, it's our biggest projects that are yet to come. They're currently in the design phase, projects of 2.3 billion euro budget that are going to connect Rhodos, Kos, and all major islands in the North Aegean by 2029. Finally, I have to have some time, like few minutes, in order to discuss what we were talking about these 3 days, interconnections with neighboring systems. IPTO is leading this opportunity to discuss with neighboring TSOs and neighboring countries in order to create more, upgrade interconnection, create new interconnection with all neighboring countries, and of course, Egypt and Cyprus. We are talking about a new second interconnection with Bulgaria that is now on construction phase. We are discussing with TEAS, the Turkish TSO, about the second interconnection between Greece and Turkey. We are discussing with Terna, the Italian TSO, about a new second interconnection between Greece and Italy. We are expanding and exploring our opportunities to participate in the Eurasia Interconnector scheme for the Greece, Cyprus, and Israel interconnection. We are discussing with the Egyptian TSO about the financing of the studies, feasibility, and incorporate them to the REPowerEU scheme in order to go ahead and really support on the Greece-Egypt interconnection. We are discussing with North Macedonia TSO about the upgrading of the existing interconnection with this country, and we're also discussing about a second interconnection between Greece and Albania. As you can see, we are opening all fronts in order to increase and upgrade all interconnection with all possible neighboring countries. Sorry, something happened. As I said, we are helping the promoter of the Greece, Cyprus, Israel project, Eurasia Interconnector, by providing knowledge, and we are also exploring our possibility of investing in the scheme if the regulatory framework permits us to do so. It's something that we are exploring. And of course, we are currently have agreed with the Egyptian TSO EETC in order to implement the feasibility study within the REPowerEU scheme. Finally, I have to say, I mentioned it throughout my presentation, financing. Interconnections are projects that need to be heavily financed. We try to achieve a 35 to 40% funding for each of our projects. Indicatively, the Attica Crete project, the funding throughout the European mechanisms will reach 450 million from the total 700 million of the funding scheme towards energy-saving project. That is a very big success for IPTO projects. We also try to fund over almost 1 billion euro for the REPowerEU for the interconnection of the Dodecanese and the northern Aegean islands. The rest of the amount is covered through loans. And I'm really sad to mention that the regulatory decision of diminishing the only way that IPTO has to get money, the WACC, from 8% to almost 6%, currently diminishes our capability or threats our capability to increase the system in the timely manner that our country and the regulatory authority and, of course, the government needs to do so. And also it poses a serious threat for IPTO for its potential exploration of opportunities in strategic new investments like the Greece-Egypt project or the Cyprus-Israel project. So I urge the regulatory authority to revise their decision in order to help provide us, help us create and help us achieve our vision and help us a little bit get more close to our common target, that is the energy transition of the islands. I think I managed to keep the time. I really thank you for your attention. And I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next discussion. Thank you very much.
Θα πρέπει να σας αποχαιρετήσω και εγώ.
Hello. Test. Okay, perfect. Have them online. In online.
All right. So welcome all to the last session of the 6th International Cretan Energy Conference. And my name is Panos Kefalas. I'm a research associate for Aurora Energy Research for Southeastern Europe. So I lead Aurora's research activities in Southeastern Europe, and with Southeastern Europe, I mean Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and more recently we have expanded to Slovenia, Croatia, and Serbia. Unfortunately, today we don't have with us Evangelos Gazis, who's the project leader of Aurora for Southeastern Europe, but I will be replacing him for this session. Aurora is an energy markets analytics company that provides energy consulting and advisory services. Now today, with a set of distinguished speakers, we'll be discussing the challenges, opportunities, but also implications for investment and financing for Southeastern Europe's transition to carbon neutrality. The key topics we'll be covering are the impact of the war on European but also more regional markets, the new and ambitious plans of the EU, such as the REPowerEU, and their impact on our decarbonization trajectory, but also the cultural shift from subsidized and fixed revenue business models to more merchant renewables. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers. So we have online John Federerson, who's the founder and the Chief Executive Officer of Aurora Energy Research. John has a vast experience in the energy sector and from various posts. That's from academia, consulting, and banking. Next, we have Julian Popov, who is a fellow at the European Climate Foundation, chairman of the Building Performance Europe, but also a former Minister of Environment of Bulgaria. Next, we have Chris Basinski, who is a principal energy economist in the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and covers the Central and Southeastern European region. And finally, we have here with us, physically in Crete, Philip Kunze, who is the Managing Director of BayVa Renewables Greece. He is driving project development in the country, and he has also a very rich background in project development in Northern Europe, as well as in locally here in Greece right now. Now, we will allocate 10 minutes for each speaker to make a short presentation, and then we'll dive right into a Q&A session to have some more interactive discussions. So let's start with John Federerson. Please, John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Panos. Just a few technical details. Can you hear me clearly?
I can.
I will assume so. Julian can, and Panos isn't on stage. And I suppose the other question is, can you see my slides, Panos? So I'll assume the answer to both of those is yes.
We cannot. Yes, we can see your slides now and hear you perfectly.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Panos. And to everyone there, I'm delighted to be able to join virtually. Shame I couldn't be there in person, but you know, the wonders of technology and how the world has changed. It's great to be able to be there virtually. The challenge I've been given to talk about is European energy broadly. You know, where are markets and policy right now, particularly in the context of the war in Ukraine. And I've also been invited to speculate a little bit on what happens next, so I'll be doing that as well. Just quickly, Panos mentioned Aurora, just to give you a sense of who we are. We're about 300 people, and we focus on electricity market analytics across the markets that are depicted in this graph. I think importantly in a Southeast European context, we think it's really important to be close to policymakers, to be close to decision makers, which is why we actually have an office in Athens here as well, and not depicted on the chart, but it should be. Well, I think officially it opens. We've got people there, we've got a space, but officially it opens a little bit later. So we are very focused on the Southeast European region with Evangelos and Panos leading the way. Let me start with the market context. And this is a bit of a timeline of what's happened. Obviously, when you think about European energy right now, the most important context is the war in Ukraine. Now, I'm not going to go through blow by blow the events of the last 4 or 5 months, but I think one thing that's become clear to me is that Europe will continue to take as much Russian gas as it can get. I think there was a debate in the Aurora office in March, probably around, you know, does Nord Stream 1 get, does Nord Stream 2 get completed? Does gas flow through it? will Europe ever use Russian gas again? Well, I think at least in the short run and over the last few months, Europe will consume as much Russian gas as it can get its hands on. And obviously, as we're seeing, and we've seen in the last few weeks, or last week even, Russia is willing to wield gas as a weapon, and it has increased the price of gas by about 50%, from 100 to 150 euro per megawatt hour in the last couple of weeks. And it will continue to do that, I expect, over the coming months. So I think the key point, as we see it now, that's become clear is the political willingness to stop using Russian gas in the short term is very low. And the Russian willingness to cut off gas is reasonably high, actually, in the short run. I think you also see evidence of this in outcomes of the recent G7 meeting, in which the US in particular was driving a policy of capping the price of Russian oil, which is a step less far than an embargo on Russian oil, which I suppose had been the policy until recently. So I think the world, particularly the OECD, is finding it's harder than it thought to get off Russian hydrocarbons in the short run. And certainly the political pressure to reduce petrol prices in the US is very high. So that's some of the key context of the last few months. Where does Europe stand right now? Now, this is a map of essentially Russian gas dependency in Europe as it stood in the first half of 2021. Green countries like the UK, which has strong domestic supplies and LNG, and Spain, which has very strong LNG import capacity, were largely not dependent on Russian gas, molecules from Russia, whereas the closer you got to Russia, the more you tended to rely on Russian gas. So in normal times, none of this really mattered. And the price of gas in a yellow country was actually pretty similar to the price of gas in a green country. The network existed, gas flows were easy across borders. Russia had been, as surprising as it sounds, Russia had been a very reliable supplier actually of gas over the last 10 to 15 years in Europe. And so there was there was some independence through LNG terminals in Poland and in some markets that were closer to Russia. But in general, there was a view that this geography didn't matter, dependency didn't matter because you had good flows through in Europe. And I think importantly, European countries would cooperate with each other. There was a solidarity. Now, I think that totally changes this winter, and dependency on Russia matters and geography matters. So UK government is already foreshadowing cutting off the European continent from some of its domestic capacity this winter. Spain is constrained by geography and its ability to export gas to the rest of Europe, much like it can't export power. And so in general, we're in a world in which the more you depend on Russian gas, particularly this winter, the more challenging the next year or so will be, which is a change in the state of affairs. In Southeast Europe, obviously where the conference is taking place, I think you see this on a small scale where, at least on paper, Romania is largely self-sufficient in gas. Bulgaria and Hungary are not. And so solidarity will be tested, I think, over the next 12 months. So that's the state of affairs in Europe right now. Now, a response to the war in the Ukraine has been this Repower EU initiative. Again, I won't go into all the details here. We'll share the slides after the presentation. But I think the key, there are a few key punchlines to this European policy. So it really does two things. One thing is it increases decarbonisation ambition, so reducing carbon emissions. And the second thing is it aims to increase energy independence, security of supply, this number 4, particularly in light of unreliable Russian supplies. My interpretation of this policy is, the Fit for 55 package was already largely unachievable from a decarbonisation perspective. It was 40% renewables in energy by 2030, and that was going to be a massive step change. So changing levels of ambition, here you can see from 40 to 45% overall in the energy mix, really doesn't do anything because we weren't going to get to 40% anyway. there are a few practical steps being taken around rooftop solar, around heat pumps, around biomethane, around green hydrogen, which I think will accelerate. But to me, the headline is not higher ambition, because we've lifted our ambition to a point to which it's not credible anymore. And so bigger targets in the distant future don't actually do anything very importantly. But I think what is very relevant in this policy, and when you combine that also with the taxonomy from 2020, is that there is an emphasis on gas for security of supply in Europe. So investment in LNG infrastructure, and in the last month or two, we've seen EnBW, we've seen, I think, Uniper sign long-term LNG contracts. These won't be the first, and we're seeing a rush to develop LNG import infrastructure. And so you've seen a fairly quick move at the European level towards acceptance of gas as part of the energy mix, certainly well into the 2030s, and in a way that is to some extent inconsistent with net zero ambitions by the end of, say, the 2030s or the 2040s. So I think my key interpretation of this Repowering EU policy is, don't focus too much on the decarbonisation bits. The ambition was already sufficiently high that it was going to be very difficult to achieve. Focus on the gas and security of supply pieces. And my take here is, we're starting to see the contours of the European energy sector 10 years from now. I think Europe will still be importing a lot of Russian gas 10 years from now. I mean, I think if Europe is not importing Russian gas, you have to question the viability of Europe's, energy-intensive manufacturing sector. If Europe's going to be a place that does energy-intensive manufacturing, then cheap Russian gas was a part of that. But I certainly think there'll be a very large insurance policy in the form of government support for storage, government support for LNG imports. And so it's a sort of take the cheap gas, but have a very large insurance policy type approach to energy that I think Europe will adopt over the next decade or so. Good. This slide just goes into a little bit of detail on what I meant by there is no point in increasing the level of ambition around renewables deployment in Europe. So on the left hand, you can see this is where we are right now, 514 gigawatts of capacity, about 22% in final energy consumption. The Fit for 55 package from last year, the ambition was to get to roughly double it. And the Repowering EU gets us higher, and all of the action is on the solar side. Quite a lot of that is rooftop solar, so avoiding some of the permitting challenges there. That's what's changed. But even if you are just trying to hit the Fit for 55 package, this is what would be required on the right-hand side. So deployment of renewables to 2021 is here. This is actual data. In the decade or so, we've averaged 21.7 gigawatts per annum. If you just look at the last 3 years where things have picked up a little bit, we're looking at 28.9 gigawatts per annum. But to hit this Fit for 55 package, you're going to need to be running at about 75 gigawatts per annum of deployed capacity starting in the year 2022. So it's just unrealistic given where the history has been. There's a lot of activity, but that is a massive step up. And what the Repowering EU does is take it up another step. So, you can be the judge of whether that additional capacity is going to make much of a difference compared to where we get to in reality. And, ambition probably does something, and some of those concrete steps around solar rooftop heat pump do something. But in practice, we were already being more ambitious than was achievable. That's why I would focus on the security policy, particularly around gas and LNG coming out of that Repowering EU policy. So finally, just to wrap it up, Aurora is a modelling company. And so we've given ourselves the challenge of thinking a little bit about, particularly in light of the last month or so, to think a little bit about what would it mean for markets if Russia were to totally halt supply to Europe from the next couple of months, right? So July 2022. You can see this is sort of a model scenario. Halt production, and if we then also deliver the repowering EU policies, which I've said I think is going to be very difficult. So you can see here, compared to a managed phase out of Russian gas, which had been very strongly our central scenario over the up until a month or two ago, you go cold turkey, lose 150 BCM of gas in 2023, and that runs on. And then you have, basically, if you cut that amount of gas out of your system, policies and prices will reduce demand for gas, and you can see the impact here. In the short run, it's very, there's a big hit. In the longer run, you can diversify, particularly with LNG. Biomethane is part of it, accelerated renewables build out, and then the build up of LNG, which is important here. And my view, talking to Aurora's pretty active in the US and in Texas, is Europe can probably have as much LNG as it wants by the end of this decade. If you turn up to the US and you offer $10 to $12 per MMBTU LNG on a long-term contract, then you can have as much as you want, as long as you give them about 5 years to develop the LNG export capacity. So these were the two scenarios we implemented. These are the price impacts as we see them. So I said before, at the moment, futures are actually towards the top of this chart, 135, 140 euro per megawatt hour. This is a slightly old futures curve, but in a world in which Russia totally cuts off supply, we see a big price impact this year, up around that 140 euro per megawatt hour price on average in 2022. And then reducing over time, I suppose, is the other key element here. And as I said, in the long run, so post 2027, 2028, my view is US LNG, global LNG markets will supply a lot of what Europe needs, or as much as they want, really, at reasonably sensible prices. 30 euros per megawatt hour is about $10 per MMBTU. So this is a short-term issue. It's a big short-term issue, and certainly there are hints that the LNG market is stepping up to the challenge. But if Russia were halt supplies, you see a big short-term impact. And on the right-hand side of the chart, you can see the short-term impact on a monthly view rather than an annual view. When prices are cut off, we see them at 160. When prices are cut off and then winter comes, we see them up at 185 or so. And we think that is the reasonable level to get the sort of demand reduction and some of the increased supply in order to offset that 150 or so BCM per annum of Russian gas that's there. So certainly in that situation, it's a very difficult winter in Europe coming up. Excellent. Finally, just to talk briefly about the Southeast European region. Aurora's main concerns are around Bulgaria and Hungary. Obviously, in this sort of scenario that we've modelled, TurkStream capacity from Turkey is massively reduced because there's a lot of Russian gas exported to Turkey, and Turkey has its own problems in that situation. Greece makes up a decent amount of the shortfall. You can see here, but it's a net a 15% decline in gas consumption in the region, and so prices need to deliver that sort of decline. The main concern from the Aurora perspective is not in Romania, large indigenous production. The question really is, how is the pain spread across the region, given the existing pipeline network, and desire to share some of the pain. So on that somber note, I will stop, having given some context over where we are right now and what this winter might look like if Russia continues to reduce its gas exports into Europe. And I think hand back to Panos in the room there. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. This is the wide European view. And if I were to summarize all of this, I would just skip 2 points. One would be Repower EU. Don't focus on ambition. Focus on gas and security of supply. And the second is data and analysis, Aurora's analysis, so that an immediate halt of Russian gas it's much more costly for Europe than a phased-out approach. Okay, perfect. Next, since we have, let's say, seen this broader overview of all these impacts in Europe, maybe we can move on to Julian, who can maybe specify this a little more to Southeastern Europe and perhaps even our closer neighbor, Bulgaria. Julian, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, I said that I will not have a presentation, but just half an hour ago I was inspired and updated an old presentation, which was actually looking into the current situation, meaning 2019 and before, and what exactly was happening, trying to understand what are the different trends in different countries. I mean, I will try to load it to see whether that will work. Let's see, share screen. Is this? Yeah.
Yep, we can see it.
Right. So, I mean, these are... First, I can't compete certainly on design and also on numbers with Aurora, but you excuse me for that. And these are more like kind of sketches about different things that are happening. And the general picture in Southeast Europe is very diverse. And we tend to say that countries are highly dependent on Russian gas, but there is another dimension that some countries are more dependent on gas in general, while other countries are less dependent on gas in general. And especially in political circles, people mix gas with energy and gas dependency with energy dependency. The thing is that some of the countries in Southeast Europe has very low import dependency, and Bulgaria is among them. I think in the European Union is the fourth least dependent country on energy import. Romania also has low energy import dependency, but they're very different when we look at gas. And one kind of picture, if we look in a slightly wider area, we can see how in the last 20 years gas consumption has developed. And if we put also Italy, which is a relevant country for the region, we see that this is a massive consumer, but the consumer of gas that has been growing over the years has been Turkey. And Turkey is a very interesting country for the region, not only because it's partly in the region, but also because Turkey has developed a massive import capacity. And one of the opportunities for the region to be supplied with gas is actually through Turkey. I mean, Turkey has roughly, I think, around 350 million cubic meters daily capacity for gas import. And more than 100 million is actually LNG. And since Turkey is not cutting its trade relationship with Russia, and at least on trading level, they kind of get on quite well, this capacity is available. And one of the ways to replace supply of gas is not through building new terminals and building new infrastructure, but using the infrastructure of Turkey and the supply routes through Turkey. I think that's relevant from point of view of the debate, what kind of infrastructure is needed, and do we need more infrastructure? And Turkey is one of the kind of pictures. If we take the, sorry about the changing in the colors, but I didn't have time to keep the colors consistent. So now the blue one is Romania. If we look more, if we take Italy and Turkey out, we will see that gas consumption over the years has been relatively steady and declining. And Romania, which is the main producer in the region, is also with a declining consumption of gas. And the country that has a very steep increase of gas consumption is Greece. And this is probably quite a risky strategy because Greece said we will get rid of coal in 2028, but that seems to be very much at the expense of a rapid increase of gas and also gas dependency, and that is a problem for the country. And from climate point of view, I should probably make a comment on climate. I mean, that might sound good, and it also might sound consistent with this concept that gas is a transitional fuel when you have to replace coal with gas in order to move towards renewables in the future. But that's not always the case. And I think, and I would say that gas is actually not a transitional fuel, and I will show that a little bit later. If we look at the countries, how they compare, so the Bulgaria, Romania, and Greece, Bulgaria, for instance, has a much higher dependency on coal. And you might say, okay, we have to do like the Greeks are doing. We have to reduce coal, increase gas. In that way, we will move towards lower emissions, and gas will play a transitional role. But there is another side of the picture that Bulgaria has a significantly lower share of fossil fuels. That's mainly because of nuclear power. So, and because of that, so if we look at the dependency on gas, there is a high dependency on gas in Romania and Greece, lower in Bulgaria. And there is a real risk for Bulgaria if Bulgaria moves more to gas, that will lead to a gas lock-in. And basically, this is a risk that has to be measured well, because if that risk can be avoided, it should be avoided. If it's unavoidable, that's a different story. So this is the typical electricity mix in Bulgaria and Greece. I mean, the thing about Bulgaria is that Bulgaria has very little gas in the electricity generation. So that's one thing. And also in heating. I mean, central heating, yes, but not district heating. And when we look at the wider picture and say, okay, I mean, do we have to go through gas in order to get to the renewables? This very messy picture basically shows that there are examples. So the UK is an example, for instance, where coal is driven down from 40% of the electricity mix to almost zero in 8 years. And that doesn't affect seriously the gas consumption. I mean, it goes up and down, but basically it goes down as well. And this is the case with Germany, which is similar case, but even more dramatic in terms of pressure on using more gas because Germany is getting out of nuclear. And if we look at the overall European case, we can see again that Europe is reducing coal, but that doesn't lead necessarily to the increase of gas. And this is kind of summary of the whole thing. And we can see that it is renewables and also energy efficiency that are the main drivers in declining of coal. I mean, obviously the problem is if you suddenly decide to cut coal down, then gas comes to the rescue in a way. But now with the war in Ukraine, which we don't know how long it will last, and also even if it's kind of turn into some sort of a frozen conflict or something like that, the sanctions on Russia will go on forever and ever and ever in one form or another. So the risks there are very serious. And of course, the other risk in getting into more gas is that countries are getting much more exposed to the gas price spikes. And yes, so I mean, these were just several examples of the region. And what I would say is that it is we are living in a moment, in time when we definitely don't know what will happen tomorrow and what will happen in the next year or 2 or 3. It's very important to model it. It's very important to try to plan it. But the sudden hits and the sudden changes are there, and we have to be prepared for that. And one thing that we have to be prepared is to work with the assumption that Russian gas will disappear. I mean, it will appear at some point, I'm sure, but the assumption that it might not be there for foreseeable future should also be one of the things on the table. And that would mean that we will have a much limited supply of gas, and that supply will kind of decline. And countries in Southeast Europe are well positioned for that because most of them have limited use of gas. I mean, most of the Western Balkan countries, all Western Balkan countries, basically. Serbia has a little bit more consumption. Bulgaria has low consumption of gas. Romania has its own, and so on. So we have to be prepared for that scenario. But also we have to be prepared for start thinking seriously of changing the role of gas. I mean, this role of gas as a transitional fuel is very, very highly risky one, because it assumes that we will close what we call baseload energy, a concept that I'm kind of not very sure about, but we will close this baseload energy of coal, and we will replace it with massive gas generation. And that we should try to avoid. And we should focus on gas not as a transitional fuel, but mainly as a balancing fuel, as a fuel of last resort, basically, so that it appears like in this kind of graphs here in Germany or in UK, basically following the generation of growing renewables. And of course, the other thing that is incredibly important in my view is that specifically the countries in Southeast Europe, but also of the whole of Europe, should start thinking about demand-side policy, wartime demand-side policy. One thing that is a very serious problem in my view about Europe is that we are living in a complete denial about the fact that there is a war. Instead of thinking, what do you do during the war? Well, you reduce demand. And we have so many technologies and opportunities to do that without reducing standards of living, level of production, and so on. But we're not doing it because we kind of have this comforting inertia that we have to fix the supply side, and that's the case. And just I will finish here with one sort of view on or suggestion about Southeast Europe. Is that Southeast Europe, most countries in Southeast Europe are actually in a very, very, very good position to avoid falling into a massive gas supply trap. This could be done mainly because there is a lot of hydro energy, there is some nuclear energy, but the hydro energy and very high solar and wind potential, a very good mix, and the proximity of Turkey, or the fact that Turkey is part of this geographical mix, gives us a very, very good opportunity to think how to avoid a rapid increase of gas and to think about reduction of gas and redefining of gas. I think Southeast Europe is particularly well positioned for that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian. That was a very interesting, I think, take on the role of gas as a transitional fuel and whether this term transitional is actually helpful. And certainly we can see that relying too much on gas for your energy strategy, whether it's Russian or not, can pose several threats. And as you mentioned, in Southeastern Europe, there are many more alternatives. Now, obviously, you said that the reliance of gas and reducing that, the most effective way to do that is to build on more on the renewable and energy efficiency space. So I would like to pass on to Chris Basinski and essentially listen from the financier's point of view. How is the landscape in Southeastern Europe, and what can we expect in the next few years in terms of the development of these projects? Because it's one of the main obstacles that there might not be enough, let's say, stability and security in the region for investors to come. Chris, over to you.
Thanks very much, Panos. Okay, just give me 2 seconds to try to share this with you. Maybe you can. You can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
And you can see it in
in PowerPoint.
Okay.
So I can see your notes there as well.
Yeah.
You just have to click one more icon.
Excellent.
Now it's full screen, Chris.
Oh, is that no notes, John?
No notes, no.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I think I'll pick up from here. As Panos said, I try and focus more on renewables here, and actually Julian's finale there is, I think, a great starting point for me. Before I do, though, let me just give a very quick introduction to EBRD. I'm sure everyone knows it well, but I think it's a helpful starting point. So EBRD is a multilateral development bank that was founded in 1991 after the collapse of Soviet Union. We had a specific mandate to try to help the countries of operation, the former Soviet satellite states, to move from being planned economies to market economies. Now, after 30 odd years, we're doing about 10 billion euros of investment across the countries of operation that you can see here. We have very much a private sector mandate, and that's reflected in the share of our financing that goes to the private sector. It's about 80% of all of our lending to date has been to the private sector. As we go forward, or I think all of our lending we've always had sustainability in our mandate to some degree as well. But as we go forward, of course, we're thinking now more and more about how to make sure our investments are genuinely fully Paris aligned. So we committed at our annual meeting a couple of years ago to ensure that is the case from the end of this year onwards. So it's already actually the case for direct financing, but by the end of this year, also our indirect financing, so through intermediate banks, will also be Paris aligned by that point. Looking ahead a little bit further, by 2025, we aim for about 50% of that financing to be not only Paris aligned, but also very specifically green as well. Other thing to mention, going a bit back to John's presentation and the war, is that the bank and the board of governors have had a very strong reaction. EBRD, solidarity with Ukraine. We have excluded the Russian Federation and Belarus from any further financing activities. De facto, Russia was already, we're already not doing new projects in Russia since the annexation of Crimea in 2014. But we've moved to close our offices in Moscow and Minsk. So really, it's a huge development because when we started, and for a long time, Russia was by far our biggest market. So, but it's must. In terms of Ukraine and the war more generally, the bank has launched a 2 billion euro framework called the Resilience and Livelihoods Framework, where we are seeking to support both Ukraine in a number of areas, but also the neighboring countries, because we recognize the huge impact on those as well, especially those taking in refugees and the strains on their municipal infrastructure and such things. A key component of that support is energy security. It's undeniable. So far, we've had 2 loans in that theme. One to the Ukrainians themselves. So we've given 300 million as a revolving credit facility to Naftogaz as part of a broader 1 billion euro package to help secure gas supplies in the end of the year. Because this exposure is very large for EBRD, we've also been lucky enough to have some of our shareholders step in and guarantee a major chunk of the loan, which is basically what facilitated this. But I guess I would emphasize here that EBRD is taking risk with its own money, if you will, and putting that towards Ukraine. We also have a very similar loan in Moldova as well, which we've just signed off last week, to support the Moldovans who have also an incredible energy crisis at the moment, to secure gas ahead of the winter heating season. So, picking up on the renewable topic, which I'll focus on mainly, the bank has really has been doing a lot of renewable investment now for quite some time. We have done more than 200 projects, pretty much across all of our countries of operation. There's a few here, a range of different technologies, and a key focus has been on trying to crowd in as much private sector investment as we can to that. I think there are three real components to the work we do on renewables. One is very simply just advocating for them. For many years, we've been advocating the benefits of renewables in terms of in the terms that the different countries best related to. So sometimes we're talking more about climate benefits. Sometimes we're talking about local pollution. For example, in Mongolia, where I've worked a lot, we talk a lot about local pollution. And now, of course, the energy security aspects of it are coming through very strongly as well. And one of the benefits is that we've been able to share experiences from our wide countries of operation, since so many of the challenges are similar. Of course, we're a bank, and at our core, we lend money. We do that in a whole range of different ways, everything from corporate finance through to equity and everything in between. We've also been investing in bonds. Actually, we had a bit of a milestone last week where we invested in a green bond in Poland, which took us over €1 billion of green bond investment. At the same time, we also, for the last few years, have been issuing our own green bonds as well to raise additional funds. Alongside our financing, we also offer a lot of technical assistance, and I think that's one of the things that really differentiates EBRD from some other competitors and also commercial banks as well. So we do that at the project level, supporting with project preparation facilities and trying to help create the pool of sort of ready to go projects, as well as environmental assessments and grid study on those as well. And then we also do a lot of work at a higher level too. So looking at the primary legislation, secondary legislation, and trying to create a sort of bankable framework. One of the beauties of being a a bank, if you will, especially a bank with a credit function that looks just like that of a commercial bank, is that we have the expertise internally to help develop investment frameworks that we can invest in. But if we can invest in, then it's very likely that other commercial banks are going to be able to do the same. And that's a key element of trying to crowd in that financing. So to move to Southeastern Europe, there are so many projects that we've done there in the last few years that would be worth talking about. I've just picked out 4 with a few comments for each of them. So the first is Bulgaria, the St. Nicholas wind farm. This was a really interesting project for us because it was the very first wind project that the bank did in Bulgaria. That was 156 megawatts in the northeast. We financed this in 2008. It was completed in 2010. We have one other wind project that we did there. At the time, there was a lot of hope. We thought that market was going to take off. And of course, then the changes in the support scheme meant that we didn't get further than our second project. And I haven't done anything there for the next decade, really. Similar story in Romania, where I think we managed to finance 4 projects. So that has been dormant. The lack of a stable policy environment there has hampered us and everyone else in trying to finance. But now we really see Bulgaria and Romania becoming very interesting markets. I'd say they're not perfectly there yet in some ways. Romania, for example, just slapped this windfall tax on renewable producers. I think with only a tentative understanding of how renewable power is sold and over different time horizons, not recognizing necessarily that they don't capture all the extreme prices that they see. So we still see policy uncertainty, if you will, in Romania. And Bulgaria, of course, has a little bit itself. The government has just fallen there. And Bulgaria lacks the coal phase-out targets that help create certainty for investors coming in. But in general, those 2 markets we see going a really good direction. We haven't really started. We haven't got any new projects off the ground there yet in the last couple of years, but we were able to refinance our original project. Not something we normally do, but interesting in this case because we were able to work with the local, with AES, the sponsor of that project, to develop a course for renewable energy, where we provided sponsorship and internships for young people, especially women coming from the coal regions. So we're also trying to work very hard to break down some of the barriers and opposition to renewables in the country in that way as well. Serbia is perhaps the most classic example of where there was a lot of potential. I think back in 2012, the country launched its feed-in tariff scheme, aiming to build 500 megawatts of renewables, but the PPA, the power purchase agreement, wasn't bankable. So we worked a lot with the authorities. Key clause in that PPA was the arbitration. It's something we see time and time again. And for financiers coming in, the lack of international arbitration is such a barrier to financing. So in the Serbian case, we worked a lot with them, and basically as soon as the PPA was updated to incorporate international rather than local arbitration, we were able to finance 2 wind parks, which made up about half the capacity of the entire feed-in tariff scheme. Albania, we financed a very interesting project last year, which again goes to another component that we're trying to push, which is innovative projects. This was our first floating solar PV. It was small, 13 megawatts, but for Southeastern Europe, we thought it was an incredible demonstration project because there's so much hydro capacity there. At the same time, sunlight is so good and the balance between the offsetting nature of solar and hydro, I think is something we want to, therefore something we want to see more solar because of. But at the same time, there's very limited land as well, especially in Albania. So for us, it makes perfect sense to try and develop the surface capacity of these dams. So that was a huge breakthrough for us. Something we already see moving now in Montenegro, and I think could be rolled out much more widely across the Southeastern European region. On a similar vein, we also financed back in 2019 a small project, just 10 megawatts of solar PV at the Oslame mine in North Macedonia. It's also a project that we think has quite a lot of demonstration effect because Southeastern Europe as a whole has so much lignite, so many lignite mines that we see as representing an amazing opportunity for solar development for a number of reasons. One, because they're large tracts of land, they're non-agricultural, they have great grid infrastructure that you can connect to already there. They're owned by a single investor or a single owner. And also they offer an opportunity to create some jobs. Now, it's not to suggest that a solar plant would have as many jobs as a coal mine, but it's a little bit of help on that front as well. So we did that project, and actually just last week, I think even on Friday, we announced that we've extended that project from 10 megawatts up to 40 megawatts, and we hope to see far more of those. I'll just say on our policy work, the bank has been incredibly active on trying to push and promote the use of auctions for renewable energy across the region, and more broadly, for a number of reasons. Crucially for us as a financier and with a credit department, like I said, that looks like a commercial bank, we are really looking for revenue stability, and feed-in tariffs or contracts for difference, whatever, offer that for us, so we can push down the cost of capital as much as possible. At the same time, we really want these to be set competitively because we think, rather than administratively, because that way we see them being far more robust to political pressure going forward. So two very quick examples just to round off. One was Albania. In 2020, I think we ran a tender with the Albanian government for 140 megawatts of solar PV at Karavasta. 50% of that capacity was covered for 15 years. We ended up with a price that was under 25 euros per megawatt hour, just incredibly low not even for the region, just incredibly low by any standards. And that same auction, the same site, was run a year before without our support, with a number of problems in the technical documentation around, and it cleared at 60 megawatts per hour. We run 1 year later with the right tender structure, and we more than half that price. So for us, it's just a really good example of how a simple tender run well can let the amazing price reductions of renewables really come out to the forefront. And finally, to go back to North Macedonia and back to Oslame, after we financed the 10 megawatt project that I mentioned before, we went on to say, okay, maybe ESM, the state company there, has some financing constraints themselves. So since we don't just want to see the state-owned companies developing projects on these mines, we came up with a new structure in which we ran a 100 megawatt tender with ESM on their mines, but to bring in two private sector players, 50 megawatts each. And the idea here was that they competed on a revenue split. So they're going to sell their power on a merchant basis and split and then offer some of their revenues to ESM as effectively payment for the land. So we had one failed tender at the beginning because of poor design, But then once it was rerun, we cleared it with 18% revenue split being offered by both companies. We also saw a Turkish company and a Bulgarian company win those. So for us, really good FDI within our countries of operation as well. We have a whole bunch of other technical support going across the region doing similar things under RRF and not. But I'll stop there and
excellent.
And pass back to Panos.
Perfect, Chris. So I was just about to say I would like to thank everyone also for, I see Philip patiently waiting for his turn, and thanking everyone for their time taking this Sunday afternoon. But essentially, right now, I would like to just hear some more from Philip, which is actually, the person that would make all this, new projects happen. He's from the developer point of view, and we would like to see what does it take to get a project on the ground, how hard it is in Greece, what are the main obstacles, and how is the life of a developer? Philip, the floor is yours.
Hello, καλησπέρα. Με ακούτε, ναι, οκ. Και βλέπουμε και την οθόνη. Θα πω 2-3 λέξεις στα ελληνικά και μετά θα προσπαθώ στα αγγλικά. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ, Αουρόρα και για την πρόσκληση εδώ. Είμαι πολύ χαρούμενα που μπορώ να είμαι εδώ. Η μητέρα μου είναι από τα Χανιά, εδώ από Χαλέπα, πολύ κοντά και έτσι είναι πάντα πολύ ωραία για να γυρίζω. Thank you very much for the invitation. As I said, I wanted to share a few words with you about, the future of the liberalized energy markets in Greece as an example for the Southeastern Europe region. Before doing that, I wanted to share a few words about our company. We're very well known in some markets in Greece, and I think Southeastern Europe in general, not that much known yet. Let me see how to... Yes, excellent. So BayWa Group basically is one of the largest agricultural companies in Europe. It serves fundamental needs like agriculture, energy, but also building materials, etc. And the mother company is working on agricultural trade, equipment, and global produce. For example, it's the largest apple trader in the world. But it also has BayWa RE, which is 100% focused on renewable energy, which is the company I represent. BayWa AG, our mother company, has a turnover of approximately 20 billion, has always been profitable in its 100-year-old history. Last year turned out a profit of 267 million in Ebrd and has over 20,000 employees. Our company focused on renewables, BayWa RE. Last year had a turnover of 3.6 billion euros with a profit of 162 million. Here you can also see the importance of the renewable energy bit in terms of the profitability also for the mother company. And we have 3,300 employees. We had 300 at the end of last year. Sorry for that. BayWa RE is active in different business entities. Projects is the business entity that I represent. We're working on wind and solar projects with over 4.5 gigawatts of installed capacity and with a global project pipeline of 21 gigawatts. We also operate more than 10 gigawatts of solar and wind projects around the world, and we are also an electricity trader with a 7 gigawatt portfolio of direct marketing of services. Recently, we've also started building our own independent power production portfolio, and we have plans to ramp that up to 2.5 gigawatts in the next few years. Last but not least, we also have a solutions business entity, which is actually working with installers and local entities across Europe and many countries in the world. We have more than 30 years of experience there and a network of 15,000 installation sales partners. And very last but not least, we also have an energy solutions business that basically designs and installs tailor-made solutions for industrial and large commercial clients to really increase their self-consumption and move towards green energy. BayWa is also very large in the area of power purchase agreements. We've executed more than 1.7 gigawatts of renewable PPAs and are also planning to do that, for example, for all our solar projects here in Greece. We are working practically everywhere on the one hand with large utilities and traders, But on the other hand, we also have a very wide network of corporates, specifically German corporates, but here you can see also a number of international corporates with whom we have executed PPAs in the past. We've executed PPAs all the way from the US to Australia, but especially here for our projects in Greece, we see a very tangible interest from some of the largest German and European corporates. You know, this includes cement companies, fashion companies, fast-moving consumer good companies, pharma and food companies. So really across the industry, industrial companies, corporates are turning green. They want more electricity, and they see Greece as a market where, of course, the sun and the wind are available, and many of them have activities here. Maybe they don't have a lot to offtake themselves directly here in the country, but we're also working with virtual PPAs, which are basically working like a hedge in comparison to the local market, where you have the project vis-a-vis the project or the location of the manufacturing site or the energy consumption site that the company has. I was asked to talk a little bit about the different perspectives and the market here in Greece. I think the European Commission and the Greek government are certainly pushing PPAs to happen. The regulators and government are committed to move in this direction towards a liberalized private electricity market. Almost all required steps have been taken. Of course, on the energy storage side, there's still some parts missing and a final framework to be published, but we're also optimistic that this will happen. And especially the government, I think, is trying to push, especially companies on the solar side, but more and more so also on the wind side, to use PPAs as the preferred way to go. What do the market participants say about that? Key players, I think, are preparing for this development, but still have very limited experience on this sector, basically. Project owners, banks, aggregators, and off-takers are all excited, but they have not executed PPAs with complex constructional structures, bank guarantees, etc. a lot. So this is something that first needs to get more traction, more, let's say, track record with them. We've been talking about financing with Chris from Ebrd quite a bit. We believe, especially here in Greece, credit rating of many local players may be one of the key, let's say, issues that need to be overcome to really foster the full, let's say, works of the PPA markets, basically. Also, on the bank guarantee side, I think many players are underestimating, what is needed there, how complex the structures are, and that the fact that they need to back up their contracts with bank guarantees. This is something that can be amended, of course, but it's something that the players need to work on, we believe. We believe, in general, Greece has an amazing potential. It has lots of sun, lots of wind. I don't need to tell you where we're here today and have experienced both extensively. There's a very interesting study that I like to quote a lot. It's a study by some of the leading German research institutes that have compared different scenarios for the German energy transition. Kind of one is full electrification. The other extreme is, a lot of hydrogen and power to fuel gases, basically. And the cheapest scenario is really to move with full electrification. And this study also analyzes the imports and exports of electricity across the different European countries. And according to this study, if you look at the per capita, so taking the relative size of the countries into account, Greece really becomes the European export champion for renewables by 2050. Of course, France and Spain are very big countries, so in total amounts, those countries still export a little bit more. But it's very clear that my country, my other half country, if you may say, Germany and also Italy will become the biggest importers of renewables. And we believe this is a real opportunity for Greece to position itself and to grow renewables into its third pillar of industry and exports, basically. Of course, everybody knows Greece for tourism, everybody knows Greece for shipping and sea transport. But in the past, Greece has been, and still is, I believe, net importer of electricity, spending, more than 760 million in 2019 on 11 terawatt hours of electricity imports. this is not counting the, depending on the oil price, 500 to 700 million a year of oil that needs to be imported for the electricity generation on the islands. We've heard from IPTO that there's a lot of changes with the underwater cable connections, of course, which is great. But Greece really, following this path, could turn into one of the largest, exporters of renewables, and with a total, export volume of 1.5 billion euros and 30 terawatt hours of electricity being exported. Of course, this requires a lot more investment in infrastructure, not only on the IPTO level, there certainly as well, but also in the kind of, transition countries in the Balkans. We were talking about underwater connections to Italy, etc. And we really believe this is something that should be tackled now. On the hydrogen side, we're already talking about a massive pipeline of hydrogen from Greece to the Central European countries, and it's absolutely clear that this should happen. But hydrogen is technology that is very important, and we absolutely believe in it and work on it. We've just finished our first installation in the Netherlands, but electricity is a much more tangible and closer, let's say, solution. And as you see, this study also concludes that electricity generation will be the biggest, let's say, a backbone of the renewables transition. And so I think the networks from the southeast of Europe to the center have to be expanded, and this is a great opportunity also to integrate the Egyptian underwater cables to export even more electricity along those lines. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I don't know if we have a few more minutes for questions. I'm certainly available for that.
Thank you, Philip. That was a wonderful presentation, and I think you made it clear. The potential is here, so it's more about how do we tap this, right? Okay, so it's a Sunday at 7 p.m. in the afternoon, so I propose that we will be very efficient with the Q&A. So there will be one question to each of you, and please take 1.5 minutes to answer it. Be very specific, and let's get to the point. So I would like to start with you, John. So we are now in a new era of the energy world, but also the energy transition in Europe. And my question is as simple as that. How likely are we to see, in the next 10, 15 years, power prices in Southeastern Europe and more broadly in Europe as an interconnected market that are on par with what we saw before the pandemic at around 2015 to 2019. What's your view on that? 90 seconds.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be too dissimilar, is my sense. I think we're in a world, as I said, a key way to understand that over the next decade is where are gas prices. They are still the predominant driver of European electricity prices, so gas and carbon prices. And there is no shortage of, in the medium to long term, foreign gas that can be provided at that 25 to 30 euro per megawatt hour level. So that hasn't changed. And from that perspective, in gas markets, this is a short run disruption. In carbon markets, I think the market was already factoring in a level of carbon price in the kind of 80 to 100, 70 to 100 euro level that would decarbonize big chunks of your power sector anyway. And I don't think the level of expected carbon price 10 years from now has changed. So yeah, short punchline, I don't think the expected gas price has changed materially since the war, perhaps by 10 or 20%, but that's enough to get a lot of global LNG on board. I don't think anticipated carbon prices have changed materially. I don't think we'll see a major resurgence in coal. And I don't think the Russian conflict has materially increased the speed of renewables build out over that 10-year period, because I think the ambitions were already in excess of what was achievable. So perhaps a little bit more downside pressure from faster renewables, perhaps a little bit more upside pressure from foreign LNG displacing some of the local gas at a higher price. But in general, no, my view of long run, 2030, 2035 European gas prices hasn't changed materially over the last year or so.
Fantastic, to the point. Excellent. Next, I would like to ask a question to Julian, which is quite, let's say, specific to Bulgaria, because this is a very special example in the transitional role of gas in Bulgaria. In just a few sentences, can Bulgaria skip entirely gas as a transitional fuel? And if so, is battery storage and renewables, are they able to fill the gap?
Yes, I think gas definitely will be skipped in Bulgaria partly for political reasons, partly because there is sort of pressure for a rapid, chaotic deployment of renewables. What we'll see is avalanche of projects that will not be very well kind of planned on national level, but they will just pop up here and there. And I'm not talking about so much about rooftop solar, but about wind, about industrial solar. I was very pleased to hear Chris talking about the massive potential of lignite fields for solar and not only. I think in the next 2-3 years we will see very strong move in that direction, and probably holding up to coal until the renewables and energy efficiency catch up. Batteries will appear. I'm a little bit skeptical about this idea of building a battery plant, but they will come, and some hydrogen as well, but mainly for the industry, not so much for export or for balance and generation.
Excellent. So in short, yes, Bulgaria is in the position and could, with the proper policy, skip completely gas as a transitional fuel. All right, so let's move on to Chris from Ebrd. And since we didn't touch upon massively on PPAs, although Philip already mentioned those, now maybe a quick estimate, right? So when do you expect to see the first 3 proper merchant financed PPAs in Southeastern Europe, whether that is in Greece, Bulgaria, or Romania? When do you think it's a proper estimate that we should be expecting the market to boom?
Good question. I would say soon. I think we've seen our first corporate PPAs in Poland already, and we've seen more commercial PPAs, if you will, already being signed in Romania and Bulgaria. So I think if by corporate we're talking more about actual corporates signing, then I think that's not far down the horizon. But the challenges that Philip talked about, I think, are very much there, and need systemic solutions. So crucially, creditworthiness of counterparts, and also just trading experience as well. Like, these are signing long-term PPAs is when you have no experience of power trading at all as a corporate. Maybe if you're Apple and Google, you can quickly buy in the expertise to do that. But if you're a cement producer or a dairy farm, that's harder. But it's somewhere where I think we as Ebrd could also try and help with technical support to try and fill those gaps. The other challenge there as well is just the tenor of PPAs. So what corporates are willing to sign, especially if they're in industries with very, very thin margins, what they're willing to sign compared to what the length of PPAs that financial institutions like Ebrd and other commercial banks would be looking for. I think there's still a bit of a gap there. So trying to close that gap for both sides, I think would help facilitate this sooner rather than later. But to answer your question in a nutshell, I think we will see these in the next 2 or 3 years coming through.
Excellent. So 2025 is the date. Perfect. So let's finally move on to Philip, and I think I will make it very specific. If you were to pick just one of your most important problems in developing a project in Greece, let's say which area during, or let's say which part of the development process would that be, or which is the most specific item that you would like to, let's say, streamline in order to see a larger development and multiplying the gigawatts down the line?
Maybe before I answer this question, thank you very much, Chris, for your mentioning of Poland. BayWa was actually the company that executed the first private PPA there just recently with our project in Witnica. So yes, it is important, I think, across the markets, and we're very proud of having been able to execute that one there. The single largest problem in the development of solar or generally renewable energy projects, I think right now in Greece is certainly the grid. And I think it's something that we see symptomatic for many countries. You know, there's gigawatts of applications. Unfortunately, politicians are mostly, and I think that's a natural human, kind of behavior, are thinking of the next biggest problem. And it was, early stage permitting and things like that, but they're not thinking through the whole development cycle. So now we have a complete bottleneck in the grid. And there's a lot of discussion how this should be resolved. We're hoping that there will be a fair and, let's say, structured approach that will give companies that can execute projects quickly fair chances to do so. One of the big problems with the whole auction situation and the past situation was that lots of companies got grid access, but then they were not able to follow through the projects because they didn't find the financing, they didn't find the auctions and stuff like that. And these kind of bottlenecks don't really help.
Excellent. So we need to focus on having the right infrastructure to connect first, and the rest are problems we can manage. Problems are there, but we can manage. Perfect. And with all that, I would like to thank you all for your time on this Sunday afternoon, being here with us. I think it was a productive discussion, and I would like to close and thank also everyone that attended this session. And thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.